Is this on? It is, right?
This one is on.
But what about the muting part? I can't.
The which one?
Oh, it's on.
Yeah.
Okay, so online, people online, you probably heard what I said just now, right? We are supposed to have a class this activity which involves some kind of a discussion. But I'm going to begin with a question. Okay? Excuse me. I'm going to begin with a question. And the question is, it will be more like a recap also of last week because we did cognitive psychology. We talked about memory, all right, sensation and perception, followed by memory, language. Now, we didn't cover in detail about problem solving. To actually go through the entire stuff, right, on cognitive side, even at introductory stage, it's one module by itself. So here, we are compressing it. And problem solving is very, very varied, okay? So what happened is, we need to work on, to get it over, right? We need to work on some assumption. The assumption is something most people can appreciate. So this part, even though I'm not presenting with evidence, but it's something that people can understand. Can you make a decision if you don't have any information? You can flip a coin, right? So it's a 50-50 thing, but it's not something we like most of the time. So in other words, we need our sensation and perception to retrieve the information. Then we got to store it in memory and compare it with previously learned information. All right. And then, of course, let's cut the story short. You process it, and then eventually you make a decision, correct? Now, hold on to this thought first. Let's consider another scenario. Do you think, when we are not under the influence of alcohol, we're not under the influence of drugs or anything, do you think we humans have free will? That means the freedom to make our own decision, not under the influence of anything else. So I've taken out alcohol, I've taken out drugs, I've taken out everything. As in every known thing that we know so far that will influence our decision. You can even take out, let's say, influence from friends. Whether it's good friends, bad friends, it doesn't matter. Okay, so you are there, you decide that maybe even a simple decision. So, for example, right, shall I play a game? Okay, so it's kind of easy. It's a very easy decision, yes, no kind of thing. No friends are telling you whether to do it or not to do it. You did not drink any alcohol, you did not have any drugs prior. Okay, right. Do you think we have free will in such situations? So I'll keep it simple. Free will? Yes, no?
It could be affected by the environment.
Yeah, but I've taken out most of the environmental factors, right? What else do you still have in mind? Let's see whether we can take that out too. Trauma? Past trauma? Okay, then let's keep it even simpler. The person was never traumatized, so never involved in traffic accidents, never murdered anyone before, never a victim of assaults. Upbringing. Okay, now that's a fair one, so we can't run away from that. So suppose the person was never involved or was never brought up in a traumatic kind of environment, like there is no family abuse. There is only, there is sufficient shower of love and warmth, and the parents did not dote the person, like over-pamper the person. Okay, we do have such scenarios, right? Yeah, there are many people out there who come from quite normal families. Quite, because I don't think there's any perfect family. But let's say it's sufficient to be within the normal range. So here we have several things. I think it's good that you have queries because now we can even out everything. So brought up in a normal family, no history of trauma, not currently under the influence of drugs, alcohol, or even medication. All right. Friends haven't talked to the person for let's say a week, maybe because or maybe 3 days. So no influence. Can we make a decision, a free will decision, whether to play a game or not? Possible, right? Under such circumstances, we believe. Well, why do we believe? Is it because that we generally have this idea that humans have free will? Of course, it can be influenced, but generally it's like inborn. Once we take out all these practical influences, it's possible to still exercise the free will. Now, what if I let you watch this? Now let's take a look at this. So by right, the discussion should go like, do we have any free will? What are some of the factors that will affect our thinking? Okay, the important thing is actually for you to discuss all the factors. Most of the time, you find that what I mentioned just now, they come up in all the discussions. Okay, there may be more, we don't know, but it's okay. Let's just rely on what we have so far. All right. Now,
when people are asked if they think that the food that they eat has an impact.
Okay, let's lower the volume a little bit. It's okay, I've turned it down and see. Tell me whether it's still too loud.
Health, most answer yes. But when asked if diet can also influence thoughts and decisions,
is it okay, volume?
willing to believe this is the
Or is it too
case.
loud? I'm letting it play to test the volume. But what do you think? Is it too noisy? Too loud? Huh? Okay, hang on.
Is this showing via?
I don't think so. Let me adjust the volume here. I'm going to replay it. I think just now at around close to 20 was quite okay. So let's go back. We need to share screen though. Yeah, you can activate that part. Okay, when you share the screen, I will play. Yeah, it should be this one. Where did you go? Somewhere. Okay.
When people are asked
Online
if they
people,
think that the food that they eat has an impact on health, most answer yes. But when asked if diet can also influence thoughts and decisions,
Just a moment, let me check. Online, are you all watching the video?
Yes.
Okay, got it. All right, let's continue then. Okay, let's see. Remember, just now we are supposed to discuss what might influence our decision. Okay, those things that we discussed earlier on usually pop up in the discussion. Now, you will watch from this video what other things could also influence us, all right? In fact, it will hijack our decision, not just influence.
People are willing to believe this is the case.
Das können sich viele Leute nicht vorstellen.
However, at the Institute of Psychology of the University of Lübeck in Germany, Professor So-Young Park has, for the first time, proven it. Her work reveals the mechanism by which food could influence our thoughts. And for that, the researcher has developed a rather original experiment.
Okay, pause for a moment. So, how many will agree that food can influence our decision? Online, you just think about it, all right? I can't really see all of your responses, but people here, we have 5 people. How many of you think what we eat can affect the way we think? It's pretty obvious, right? Nowadays, we know this. Including 4?
No, just like you asked us to raise hand, right?
Yeah. So there are 5 of you all here. So, so most of you, basically at least 80% of you all here, say that yes, it will. Now, but we generally think that we still have control over the food, at least a little bit. We can decide what we want to eat. we can decide not to be impulsive under the influence of food. I mean, I'm not talking about food such as alcohol, alcoholic kind of food. I'm not talking about foods that has drugs, all right, put into it. I'm talking about normal food. All right, in Asian diet, most of us will eat some form of rice. So I'm talking about those things. Now, one last question. If food can influence the way we think, how long do you think we need to eat? All right, general foods, right? How long do you think we need to be eating certain foods before we get influenced? So some of you may think of maybe those people who are obese, right? So they have to take a long while to accumulate the fat before they start to think, oh, maybe I should cut down on certain foods. Okay, so generally speaking, how many people, let's just put show of hands, and the online people, I can't really see all your responses, okay, but you just follow along and you make your own decision. Now, generally speaking, does it take, I'm going to ask in several ways, so we are talking about years, we're talking about months, weeks, and then days. Do you think the normal food we eat, we need to eat like more than a year before we will start to change in our thinking? That's option A. Do you think we will eat like maybe several months up to a year before we realize, okay, I think I need to change some of my thinking, which will of course change your lifestyle, all right? Then that's option B. Option C, maybe eat a few weeks. Option D, eat a few days. So anything from 1 day to 14 days, all right? When let's say you change your new diet, all right? So 1 day to 14 days before you start to think of, okay, I think the food is making me make decisions in a different way. So we have 5 options, right? A, B, C, D, E. The E is within a few hours. So we have 5 options. More than 1 year, option A. Option B, in a few months, but less than a year. Option C, in a few weeks, all right, but less than 3 months. Option D, maybe in a few days, all right, 1 to 14 days. And the last option, within a few hours. Normal foods that we eat, if it does influence the way we think and maybe eventually change our lifestyle, how long would it take before we would start to change? A, B, C, D, E, you write down somewhere, okay? So later you have somewhere to compare. So same thing for online. Instead of asking people to respond which one, we don't need to do a count, you just compare your answers, all right? Actually, online maybe I can. Oh, yeah. I ask them to put into the chat. So key their easier, then we do a rough count. Because yeah, I think we can. We have a bit of time. In the chat, for online people in the chat, you just key in your answers. Then we do a rough, we eyeball it and see what is the majority answer. What about people here? Option A, raise your hand. Option B, few months. Option C, we have 1. So that's a few weeks. D, for a few days for us to be influenced. And last one, a few hours. So online, you can't see the responses here. All right, what we have is, we have hands for each option, okay? But then there are only 5 people here. But I didn't see which one did you choose? Second one. So that would be a few days. A few months. Okay, sorry, we have 1 person saying that it will take years before we are under the influence of whatever we eat. And then 2 people about months. So basically, if we look at it in a general way, the majority opted for longer periods of time, such as it takes weeks to months to years before we will feel the impact of the food that we eat that will sufficient enough to affect our decision making. And then we have 1 person saying that it will take a few hours. Let's look at online. According to Rachel, she said there's a lot of D's and E's. Now, I do not know whether it's because you are responding to knowing that, this Mr. Lam, surely you should ask some kind of what we do not expect, okay? Never mind that aside. Let's continue. I think it's here. Oh, no, let's go to here.
Imagine that you face the following dilemma. The money on the table is to be divided into two sums. But it's your partner, a stranger, who decides how it is to be distributed.
I give you €2 and I keep 8 for me.
If you accept the unfair offer, you leave with a little money, but much less than your partner's. If you refuse, no one wins anything. So what would you do? Do you accept the offer and take the €2 even if you feel cheated? Or do you refuse and leave with empty pockets, but your head held high? Well, it turns out, surprisingly, that whether you'll take the money or not depends on what you've just eaten.
In dieser Studie
As part of this study, we followed 24 people who came into the laboratory twice to have 2 different breakfasts.
und was wir feststellen konnten, ist, dass
We found that the same person made completely different decisions based on what they ate in the morning.
was die Person an dem Morgen
So
gegessen
this is important. It is not different people. So their personalities are not involved now. Their upbringing also not involved. Because they have what we call a repeated measurement kind of experiment. All right, it doesn't happen within a day. So it's, for example, if you come in day 1, you eat certain thing, and then you make your decision, you go. Then after that, right, you return again on another day. So after everything has been flushed out, so it's not like you wait a year where there could be more changes. You could be just waiting about 2-3 days down the road, then you come back and you repeat the thing. Got it? All right? So in this case, it's always the same person. You can't argue about personality, upbringing, trauma, everything.
But you could be, it's the same person, he already know the first experiment. So the second experiment to him, maybe the first one.
There is possibility of learning effects.
Then after that you realize that, it's stupid, at least I take like or something. So maybe the second time.
That's why we need large numbers. Okay? So if it's 1 or 2 person, no. But when it's a large number of people, some people will remember, and then they decide that they want to go opposite. Some people wouldn't. So statistically, we can still make something called partial correlation to tease out all these factors. Okay, so there are actually what we call scientific methods to tease out. It's easier because personality, upbringing, all this cannot control one. You know, they're talking about years. But a few days of differences, learning effects possible. All right, let's continue.
hat.
To the test person, the 2 breakfasts look the same. In reality, one is far more protein-rich than the other. The ratio of protein to sugar is the only parameter that changes. A few hours after the meal, the subject takes several tests on a computer. Today, he accepts the offer. His self-interest outweighs his anger at the unfairness, and he will leave with a little money in his pocket. Last week, he mainly refused and won almost nothing.
Und wenn die Probanden an dem Morgen
The subject, having consumed a high-protein breakfast in the morning, was tolerant of unfair
haben
offers.
sie auch toleranter auf ein unfaires Angebot reagiert.
Conversely, the subject who consumed a high-carbohydrate breakfast
Haben sie
was less tolerant in the face of unfair offers.
Angebote reagiert.
On average, the subjects who have
Okay, so they are not looking even at a Western diet. Bread is also something that is consumed here. So how they adjusted for it, you saw just now, people just ate more bread instead of cheese. All right? Now, let's continue.
had little protein rejected unfair offers twice as often. But how can this surprising result be explained? In their search for biological evidence for this observation, the scientists carried out blood tests.
We will send the blood to the laboratory for analysis. We will measure the level of hormones and amino acids in the blood. For hormones, we are interested in insulin, cortisol, adrenaline, and adrenocorticotropic hormone. And for amino acids, tryptophan and tyrosine.
By the way, these are not unknown to you. We learned that in lesson 2 and 3. Basically, he's talking about stress hormones, right? Cortisol, adrenocorticoids. Then he also talked about what? All these tryptophans, they are actually precursors to your serotonin. So these are neurotransmitters that we've talked about before. Okay? So this is not like a biology lesson, it's actually linked to your lesson 2 and lesson 3. Okay?
Of these substances, the most important is tyrosine. The amino acid is one building block of a protein that is key to brain function, dopamine. This molecule ensures communication between neurons involved in motivation and risk-taking. The results of the blood analysis show that subjects with higher levels of tyrosine in their blood are more willing to accept the unfair offer. In other words, what we eat can within hours subtly alter the chemistry of the brain and thus the communication between the neurons. Enough to guide some of our decisions. Experiments are continuing in Lübeck to confirm this result.
And in case you think that it's only about whether we want to play a game, it is not. There are far wider implications, is that whether you are impulsive or not depends on what you eat, and it comes within 1 to 2 hours after you've eaten. So think about crossing roads. Think about if you wake up, let's say, right, your boss is stressing you out. So you wake up on the wrong side of bed. Might you abuse your pets more? Will you be fair or unfair in the way you treat your 2 children? All these things, it's just a couple of mouthfuls away. So how do we select our food? All right, makes you have more thinking, right? Secondly, if you focus on the protein, because all foods that we eat generally have some proteins and fats and sugars. So this part, I didn't narrow down. The idea lies in actually the amount of sugar or sugar-related foods. So bread, noodles, rice, porridge, especially porridge. They don't have porridge, not so common over there. But anything that can quickly give rise to a lot of insulin and it's very sugar dense, so whether it's pure sugar or it converts to sugar very easily, that is actually the key. It makes people more impulsive. And this is not the only study. So whilst people tell you, oh, it's okay, have a bowl of porridge, is a healthy thing, rather than you eat fried chicken. Yeah, you are healthier, that you don't get heart disease, but then after you live longer to do what? Murder someone, is it? Because your impulsivity will increase. Okay? All right, you can watch the video. There's only a bit left, but I think you can watch it when I upload it. All right? And this is not, the impact is not simply within like 1 to 2 hours you will come under the influence of food. In fact, you will be changed by the food. The thing is, we do this every day, almost every meal, right? It's okay to eat rice. And they tell you it's also okay to eat brown rice because it's the healthier version. Yeah, the current research that is being announced to the world has to do with cardiovascular health, maybe diabetes. But because brain research is very new, it will probably take another 20 and 30 years before they realize that maybe some of the crimes today is because people didn't take preventive actions in the food they eat. Maybe some of the things they regret in life. So crimes, still smaller percentage. But what about some of the decisions you make and you regret it later? Okay, so making sure balanced diet, also looking into reducing carbohydrates and sugary stuff is actually key to a higher quality lifestyle in the future. You have a question?
Yeah, can I say what you earlier taught us? The decision making or the thoughts of the person is also the intake of the food will impact on the person.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I ask, if you deny the person from taking food, so he went without food, maybe like, for example, maybe fasting or really complete fasting. So during his fasting time, when he go about making decision, is there
Yes, there is.
What I'm driving at is criminology. So in the way that if we get statement from the accused, don't let him eat food, in a statement or otherwise.
No, but you are talking about fasting in a very general sense. Different amounts of time under fasting will lead to different outcome. So typically, about 1 to 16 hours of fasting doesn't really have a big impact. The biochemicals hasn't changed enough. Okay, so we are uncomfortable with anything. If you are used to eating 3 meals, for example, then anything above a certain threshold of time, like let's say when you are awake, you need food every 6 hours. You're used to it. But if you push beyond that by, let's say, half the amount of time, let's say 9 hours, you start to feel hunger pangs. So yes, the hunger itself can make people become more motivated to do certain things or less, but it's really still within our control. Now, if you want to talk about biochemicals coming in, it's usually around 14, 16 hours later. But unlike what was believed in the past, because all along, right, people only starve and then look at whether people are under the pain of hunger, will they do certain things. And some of these things were just observed from people like being tortured, starved for a long time. But now with better equipment, you're able to do blood testing, we're able to do MRI scans. So up to 14, 16 hours, no big deal. We can really just say that, okay, the pain, no big deal. I can tolerate. Half a day don't eat, no big deal. Beyond that, then things will start to change. So somewhere around 16 hours to about 1.5 days, so depending on people now, you might actually feel more alert. One of the reasons is because adrenaline will start to what? Will start to be secreted. It is to help you deal with the stress of survival. But when you are more alert doesn't mean that you will become more impulsive. All right? Being more alert means that you will generate solution faster. So in this case, right, if you talk about criminal, then now it depends on the person's primary goal. If the person's urge is to escape from custody, then they may think faster and look and become more able to find solutions. So if the people who are in charge, let's say the wardens, they have their good carbohydrate-filled meals, then they might actually lose out. Okay, but you must know, all the wardens usually have everything in place already, right? But if you even out the score, you're just playing this like a game where the two sides have similar conditions, the wardens are probably going to lose out in terms of generating solutions to stop the criminal from escaping. So starvation, if we are trying that out, we should really be locking the person in an electronic cell where there is no way to get out, and there's a code that whether inside, outside, or cannot access this person beyond 3 days. So now we're forcing other chemicals to come into play, all right, where the adrenaline does not give the person an advantage. Beyond this, we are also looking at, now, this is a brief lesson, so I'm not going to go too much detail. There is a dozen different kinds of chemicals that will change, all right, making people either think clearly, then they work on it, and in the long run, their bodies will also change. So the bodies will now start to, all these things about detoxification, it's not accurate. All right, it's actually a misbelief. But so I know there are some people out there who tell you, the natural healing, you should go on fasting for several days. The end effect that they talk about, most of it matches with what we know. But the way they explain things like because of detox, so you are more alert, that's wrong. Because they didn't have access to what is really happening. I mean, what do you expect? All these things we can't really measure 20, 30 years ago. So based on people just observing from the outside, they obviously would get some of the explanation wrong. So what's really happening inside makes the deal. Why certain people are more alert? Why is it that even that when we go on starvation, people have better outcomes dealing with cancer rather than succumbing to the disease? By the way, if you just go on starvation, it's not going to help much with, just in case, right? This is a big topic. So if you just go on starvation alone, it's not going to help much with helping to ward off cancer. Actually, taking all these anti-cancer drugs together with starvation is what is really helping. But doctors are very afraid to adopt this because when you go on starvation, your body is lacking nutrients. So they are afraid that the lack of nutrients, right, would actually kill you when you are under all this radiotherapy and chemotherapy. All right, but there is a reason behind why starvation plus all these anti-cancer drugs is actually more helpful. So that means, right, there is a need to actually look at how to adjust the starvation mode without ending with malnutrition killing the person, but still having a low amount of nutrition that will still work towards helping the cancer drugs to increase the chances of getting rid of the disease. Okay, now this is very, very lengthy. I cannot go into this, otherwise we will overrun. If you are keen on it, you need to then look up all the within the last 5 to 10 years research on this. It will be at least another 20, 30 years before people work out the parameters and also all the medical professionals and related professionals come down to agree that starvation plus anti-cancer drug is the way to go. Okay, so it is usually 2-3 decades before any consensus is reached. So if you want to then go and tell your doctor and they say, no, my lecturer, Mr. Lam says so, please don't, okay? Yes, I'm sharing with you what's on the latest end of research, but it will take 2-3 decades before people come down to agreeing on this. So you don't have to fight. You can learn more about it, of course, and then you can discuss if you are unfortunately down with this kind of diseases with your doctor about how to approach. All right, unless it's emergency, they usually won't override. They will listen to you, and then they will discuss what is the best outcome with you. Now let's go back to the slides. Any question? So this video ends the last week's stuff on cognitive psychology up to the point of memory and decision making. Today we will look at when you have all these tools, how do you further improve on it? So we will deal with 2 things. The measurement of overall problem-solving ability, which is IQ, and later on looking at learning. Just a moment while I turn on I think I didn't set the slides just now. Okay, not everything is emphasized in this set of slides. Intelligence, it's not simply about being smart or not so smart. Okay, that is lay people trying to sometimes be a bit sweeping in their evaluation of people's capabilities. Unfortunately, this way of thinking has led to a lot of biased treatments, all right, unfair treatment, all right, against other people. If you look at psychology, these are some of the definitions we've come up in life. Okay, quick one, check your notes, skim through, because the old definitions are not so important. All right, and of course, one of the earlier ones by Professor Boring is really boring. Okay, I mean, what the hell, what intelligence test can measure? But you don't even, at the time, you don't even know what's good intelligence tool to measure. Okay, so over the years, it was refined. By the time we reached 1990s, we have refined the concept based on investigation, research, that we are really dealing with what is the potential, all right, of problem solving. So different people have different potential or different hidden ability to solve problems. Whether they can unleash it is another story. That may require learning to unlock all this. And they found that the potential depends on what your parents give you through your genes and your prior learning. So we will deal with learning later. Let's look at the outcome first. So intelligence is really a measure of your general abilities and your known skills for solving a problem. But this doesn't mean that the person can apply. We're just measuring the potential. That's why you find that some people have very high IQ, right? But they can only study and they don't seem to be able to work. It's not that they cannot work. It's because they have not learned how to transfer the potential into what? Into the so-called, in inverted commas, right? Kinetic energy. They don't know how to practice it. all right, which leads to another bias. So a lot of policymakers out there, they focus too much on the potential. So that leads to some unfair practices in the working environment, okay? Like people who have a degree, they usually start off at a higher position, you know, that kind of thing. So like I say, it's not because there's this kind of statement that, oh yeah, the person can only study, cannot work. They can, if they are willing to learn how to transfer the skills. Unfortunately, the bias also stops some people, making them feel arrogant, so they refuse to learn or listen to how to transfer the skill, okay? So, but then this is Earth, like I say, there will always be pros and cons, all right? It is good to recognize people's potential, but then we still have to cover for the error of letting people become too big in the head with their potential. Now, from here onwards, right, the green color slides, let me finish up with the history of intelligence. So you have a more comprehensive picture of it. So I'm going to just talk about all these slides, right, the definition, all the way until somewhere here, okay? But I'm going to, so you can refer to your slides. Do you all have it? So, so that I'm not interrupted, I will just stick to this, because later on, I'm going to talk about example, okay? Meanwhile, if you are copying notes, it's within everything up to the monarchic theory. Got it? So let's finish this in 1 minute. What is the history of intelligence? Actually, only the Chinese civilization were known to have a more objective way of measuring intelligence or the potential to solve problems. This was India, in their system of selecting government officials. So more than 1,000 years ago, in the whole world, only the Chinese government, right, insists on having villagers, those who had, and it's not smart villagers, it's those who had opportunity to attend schools, to travel to the imperial capital where they take exams. And those who clear the exam, they got selected for official posts. But then you need to also understand, despite having a system, their testing wasn't really testing so much on intelligence per se, because it also tested people's physical stamina. Like an imperial exam, right? You will be put in a very tiny cubicle, only about 1 to 1.5 meters by 1 to 1.5 meters. And then you have the shit pot at the side. So the person will actually have to shit, sleep, eat in that cubicle for anywhere between 3 days to about 7 to 9 days while they answer the exam. So you see, this is not like today, we only have a lengthiest exam is about 3 hours, unless it's practical. Okay, and then you are all dirty, you don't get to shower. Now, but if you look at the system, that's what it is. In the rest of the world, there is nothing. Okay, so if you want to be very pure about it, that means in the world there is no good tool to measure intelligence. Because even the Chinese imperial system, there is a lot to do with the person's tolerance to hygiene issues and stamina. It's not so much whether they can really solve problems. Okay? And the test, right, also includes making poems, all right, talking about the classics, which is about relating to how people should carry out certain customs. It's not about solving problems. All right? Now, so in the whole world, there was really nothing until Industrial Revolution came about. What the Western world needed was that they needed a lot of people to be educated, to learn how to use modern tools. But when they put a lot of children into schools, they found that it didn't work, because not all children could think the same. And the worst part is some children have development delay. So you can't teach those people. They needed a way to isolate out children who needed extra education, or even these people cannot go through normal education. All right. Now, by the way, some people might ask, but I thought education has been around for thousands of years. Yes, but not in the way that it works properly. In the past, there were schools, but they were all called pedagogues. So pedagogues are places where you can learn from a master if you are not doing some kind of craft work. With craft work, you will have master and apprentice. So in places where several students are there is no standardized syllabus. You basically learn whatever the master wants to teach, or in this case, well, they have the teacher lah. Now, okay, the equivalent of a teacher wants to teach. So it may not work for everything. So if your teacher is well versed in martial arts, in mathematics, in languages, you get to learn everything. Otherwise, right, you will just basically, you might just learn shit. So in the West, when they standardize education, they have a standardized syllabus, making sure that people learn things that are useful to using tools, mathematics, all these things, like what we have today. And they found that some students cannot catch up. So the French Minister of Education, at least the equivalent of this position, somewhere in the late 1800s, he commissioned this guy called Alfred Binet, to design an instrument that can measure intelligence so they can pick out those students that cannot benefit from education. Now, in those days, people were still pretty backward in their thinking. Their intelligence testing can also include running, how fast you can run, all right? So you notice that it's similar to the Chinese imperial system. They are not really testing people's thinking ability. But Alfred Binet thought about it and decided that if you really want to talk about how to tease out, you really need to look at how people go through education, right? So that's a proper way of the reason. So what he did was he went to all the schools, he collected all the exam questions, and he decided to design a test based on all this, which he did. So eventually the first intelligence test was born, and it's very academic oriented. If you take a look at the question here, the example here, you'll find that these are not like asking you to do your English and do your mathematics, correct? But this is actually a sample of maybe the 5th or the 6th version after the original thing. Okay? Now, so by today, we realize that problem solving will also need to look at your general common sense. Like if you find an envelope on the floor with a stamp but no chalk, what might you do? So there are such questions. Then there are tests that test you on playing jigsaw puzzles, how fast you can look at pieces and imagine the full picture out, as well as what you read on this. Plus the ability to track numbers. Like if you look at number 10 has repeat after me certain randomized numbers, correct? So it's also tracking your ability to track numbers, not simply do arithmetic with them. Okay? So it's really looking at the potential to solve problems. Got it? Now, so once this thing came out, it was finally published sometime in the 1910s. And it took another about 10, 15 years because this thing came out in France. So by the time Americans knew about it, all right, because at that time, 1910s, 1920s, Europe and America had psychology. And America started to outpace other countries. By 1920s, all this information was recognized in US, and the first university, right, Stanford University, decided to buy over the rights to the test. So that's why it's now called, if you look up there, it's blocked by the menu here. But those people who are online, you should be able to see. Otherwise, on campus, you take a look at the top of the table, there's this name called Stanford Binet test. Alfred Binet is still recognized in the test, all right, as the creator. Stanford is not a person, it's actually Stanford University. When they bought over, they also revamped the whole thing. So now it's to be something more accurate in measuring potential to solve problems. So this thing is now commonly used, but it is not the #1 tool. Because at about 1930s, another tool that was similar overtook it because it was more accurate. Stanford Binet test at that time, right, even up to the 30s, was still very academic driven. So it doesn't measure like your general abilities, like whether you can very quickly realize some bits and pieces of puzzle and realize a bigger picture out of that, which is important for us. So this is called a cognitive synthesis skills. Whether you could pick up bits and pieces of information and piece it together to form a well-formed solution. But that other testing tool, this one, a Wechsler's intelligence scale, managed to do that. It actually looked at academic as well as general problem-solving skills. So when it was started in the 1939, it became official. All right. Then later on, somewhere around slightly after Second World War, it overtook Stanford Pioneer's position. Today, the world's keep this in mind. Today, the world's most popular tool to measure IQ, that means to measure your potential to solve problems, is the Wechsler scale. And it recognizes that adults and children have different kinds of brain structure. So thinking might be different. So there is a scale for children and there's a scale for adults. Got it? So the testing tool is slightly different for both. All right. Now let's move back a little bit. Now that you're acquainted with the history, now what happened slightly afterwards? In order for things to be refined, right? They have to ask the question. So your tools, this question in layman's way, it goes like this. So they ask, so we have tools to measure intelligence, meaning your general ability to solve problems. But seriously, the tool shows that there is something like people do have a potential. But is it really true that there is a component in the brain that houses the general ability to solve problems, or it's just a fake thing? Why is it a fake thing? Because they think that, what if all these tools that were designed, right, which they don't have all these scans, all these new tools that we have today, they can't look into the brain. So they wonder, is it because it's just, and after we found out all the data, right, and it's just coincidentally predicts that there is something inside the brain, but it's actually not there. Now, this kind of things, we call it what? An artifact, A-R-T-E-F-A-C-T. Meaning you develop a tool, and then you have the tool, right, you measure a phenomenon, and then after that you say that, oh, the phenomenon exists, but actually the phenomenon does not exist. It's just a figment of our imagination. We were influenced by the data to think that something exists. Like in the past, people believe that ghosts exist. Maybe they do, but we still have no evidence of it, right? Assuming ghosts does not exist, you find that later on people have a lot of things that they discover is really not ghosts. Like electromagnetic effect. Last time people think, wow, got ghosts, but it's not. So if you put electricity back into ancient days, they will still think that, wow, this is magic, but it's not. Although if you show them light bulb lighting up, they will tell you it's magic, it exists, correct? So the scientists were concerned because by 1930s, research methods came into existence. They realized that humans can conjure up any kind of concept when something doesn't exist. So they needed a way to tease this out. And they looked at all the data. Fortunately, at that time, there was a very smart statistician, psychologist, philosopher, whatever. He has a lot of things under his belt. So this guy, Spearman, he invented a way to use mathematics to look at the data and analyze it and see whether there is really something or it's just a fake phenomenon. So mathematics can solve a lot of things. Like, how did Einstein even know that light has a certain limit in the speed? Obviously, you can't measure back in those days, right? And they did try in the 1800s, but it all failed. But relativity, all these things, right, worked on because what? People like Einstein developed a mathematical thing that was later proven 50, 60 years down the road that, yes, what he designed to test using maths worked. So same thing, we have the, like Einstein in psychology, Spearman. So with the statistics, he showed that it is true. This thing exists. So all your abilities, like you can count, you can do spatial analysis, meaning you can go around in 3D space, your ability to logically reason things out, they all have a central potential. And this is labeled little g. So if after this has been shown, they now can condense all the data and all the things that were found out so far into a theory called monarchic theory of intelligence. Okay? So where do you put the star? All right, you should put a star. All right. There's Stanford Binet test. Put a star here. Then, all right, this part is for you to read about it, okay, in case you need it to be more comprehensive. Spearman's monarchic. Spearman's aid in proving the monarchic theory of intelligence. So this put a star. I've given you lots of wordy stuff, so it's for you to read. Okay, but basically it's what I mentioned. All right. And of course, if this is not good, too wordy, then the picture tells you, all right, it's a summary of that. Got it? Okay, then put a star here. Why? So people not only have Stanford Binet test, but they also have Wechsler test. So all these things, they were the precursor, or they provided the data for the analysis, and subsequently, once recognized, they became used in full force to measure the little g. So in other words, today when you look at IQ, measurement of IQ, you are really measuring little g. But of course, we don't want to have a tool that's so limited, only measure little g for what? So all the tools, like let's take a look at Wechsler scale, they not only measure little g, which is represented by the full scale IQ score, it also measures some of your multiple intelligence components, like visual IQ and performance IQ. Up to version 2, it was only looking at what? At your ability to learn and to like English or any languages, logic, reasoning, and maths. Then performance IQ measures your ability to translate all those so-called skills into general use. So they can actually tell whether a person can work or not, although it didn't really function that well. Because there will still be people who score high intelligence scale, go to good schools, and come out still not very good at practical work. Okay? By today, they make it that, no, there are more components now. So I'm not going to go into details of this. Like, I'll give you one example though. Like, so let's say, this portion here, right? The verbal component, it is a very specific measure of how well a person can make use of the little g to communicate. But communicate technical stuff, not so much like EQ kind of thing. And this working memory thing, it looks at how fast, the speed of their thinking, and the efficiency that they manipulate all the information in their memory. Now, so if you think about it, right, so now we are sharper at finding out about whether, whether certain things, whether certain people really can work or cannot work. Right? Because last time you just throw it to what performance IQ is, still too general. But now we literally can see, some people, they may have studied a lot because they memorize a lot. But that doesn't mean that they can work very quickly with their memory. So they are slower at generating solutions. And if these people refuse to learn because they have further belief systems and arrogance, then we know, okay, this person is not very practical. Got it? All right. Ultimately, with all the testing, another thing was discovered. In that intelligence is not, it has more or less in different people. So if you arrange everyone, right? So let's say after you test everyone, you arrange them from lowest IQ to highest IQ, then you find that this curve will appear if you plot them out. Like what curve? Very few people will have mental retardation. Obviously, otherwise we will become extinct already. And also there will be very few people who are like super genius. Otherwise, we will all be flying to the stars instead of still being stuck in primitive technology like now, right? But most people have average IQ. So this y-axis, so now you know, right, the x-axis measures your intelligence by what? Low intelligence arranged all the way to high intelligence. The y-axis actually measures how many people display their intelligence score. Okay, so you notice the curve actually boosts up somewhere where it's average IQ. But that's normal. Okay, most humans have average IQ. Well, average IQ is what? Is defined to be a score between what? Between 100, so our IQ score, IQ is not a score that is 0 to 100, so your 100 means you perfect score, no. The middle score is actually 100, and then it ranges from all the way to people who have very low because they can't think clearly, they are like having some form of cognitive developmental delay. In the past, we call them people who are mentally retarded. Already is a bad term, try not to use it. And people who demonstrates very quick thinking. All right, currently we still use the term called genius, although this is yet another bad term because it may breed arrogance and misunderstanding. All right, so so most people, about 69% of the people would have a score between 85 to 115. That is average. Once you go below, you will start to have what? Educationally subnormal. So they can still go to school, but maybe not so good. They need, so usually you find these people in what? If you are looking at Singapore's education system, in primary school, nowadays primary schools they don't have it. Last time they call it what? The extended stream. Normal stream in primary school is okay. Extended is those people who take 8 years to finish primary school. Then in secondary school, right, the word normal becomes called express. So those people who are performing below the so-called express stream, they are either normal academic or normal technical, right? The normal technical would have a lot of all these educationally subnormal. Normal academic still not too bad. They are just like, maybe they have some challenges with language, but they are still showing actually pretty normal kind of intelligence. So if you measure it, they are probably somewhere around 85 to 90. But somewhere between 85 to 70, where it's educationally subnormal, they need a different format of learning. Those are the people you usually find in normal technical stream. Okay? So no need to become confused. If you're not a Singaporean, ignore this. I'm only talking about Singapore system because it's easier for people who are here to appreciate how this thing has also been applied, as in the intelligence thing, applied to our policy making. Yes.
We read of isolated cases, normal technical students excel and even went to
Yes.
and also, is it the development of the brain or something?
Because one of the reasons, or not all, one of the reasons is because these are only potential to solve problem. Potential is not fixed. Whilst it's difficult for someone to increase their potential because your brain structure is like that, luckily humans have what we call brain plasticity, meaning the brain, the nerves you've learned before, it can grow and it can adapt. So if a child is motivated enough and then given the right kind of stimulation, they will accumulate more potential. So that's stage one. Stage two, you allow the potential to unleash. You find that the normal tech stream person can then progress on to learn like normal. Okay? Sometimes the suppression can be due to what? Bad parenting. So they are measured to be only showing what? Educationally subnormal level, not because their brain structure is like that, but because the parents give up on them or the parents were too harsh on them. So it's possible to still tweak all this. It's not that you got measured like that and then, okay, that's it, slated. This was a big mistake Singapore made. Singapore in the 80s, right, they literally just, once you are pushed into, that's why a lot of parents are very afraid of their children being put into all these lower streams. Because they grew up in a stream, in a system where once they put into a lower stream, that's it, they are stuck. Okay? The government now recognizes it's not so they make a lot of concession, but it's very difficult to change people's habits. So parents are always so, what we Singaporeans call very kiasu, very afraid to lose out. So they keep forcing their children because it was their experience to be stuck. Okay? So now this thing, all right, it tells us that now we have changed. That's why I keep highlighting all this is to tell you that psychological information, it was misinformation in the past because people misuse it. They didn't abuse it, they misuse it. The lack of understanding. Like they stream people and then they keep them there. Okay? The information should be used on how to improve people, not so much on how to label people and then keep them stuck. All right? So normal people, normal intelligence means this about 69% of the people. And then there is grading like how many. So this thing, it's actually quite shocking to humans back then. Because they then realized that we are not very different from lampposts, from cars, because all the statistics, right, were developed to segregate, right, or categorize the instruments we make. Like you look at a lamppost, they tell you all the lampposts are about 5 meters high. But if you really take them down and measure, do you think all lampposts are at 5.00 meters? Or could it be that some lampposts is like 4.97 meters? Because they are all made from different molds, right? Like one batch will be from one mold. So, but if you lay it out, right, when the order was made to have 5 meters post, most of them will be 5 meters, some will be a bit lower. So human intelligence were the same. When you distribute, it becomes like there is some kind of law about nature that we follow too. That will be about 69% of the people will be on average IQ. Their potential is like recognized to be like every other people's. Okay? So there is no such thing, therefore, right, there is no such thing as suddenly we can become smarter. But people beg to differ, they say that no, education makes it different. But that's because we are pumped with new information. That doesn't mean that our brain structure is capable of being smarter than, let's say, a neural network computer machine. There's no such thing. There's no sudden improvement. All right? Which brings us to something else. Okay, before I move on, let me finish up with two things. One, what is this IQ now? So I like to show, I don't think I have it there. I used to write it out. So, okay, online people, you just hang on, Rachel will help type it in. I think you probably have to help type this, please. I'm going to write on the board. IQ equals something called MA divided by CA multiplied by 100. But first, this formula is wrong. What the hell? Why you then write it? The original thing to conceptualize IQ is to measure people's mental age, divide by their chronological age, which means, okay, we'll look at how to get mental age later. Chronological age is easy. Okay? This one is just how many years you are alive till now. So basically, tallies with your birth date or your birth year. And this 100 is because in the past, right, people don't like to see so much of decimal numbers. So they make it like some kind of percentage. Okay, so no big deal about the 100. Mental age, right? Binet was the first person to devise this. What he did was he went to the schools. He got a lot of questions. And then this was what he did. He selected out certain questions that are usually targeted. Okay, I'll use in Singapore's language, right? Primary 1 to 6. Then after that, secondary 1 to 4. Okay, for easy understanding. So he went there, he looked at all the exam questions for primary 1, primary 2, primary 3. Then, right, he didn't just stop there. What he did was, he then let a lot of children take all these questions. Then so it's a lot of work. Then after that, right, he pieced them, he swapped some of the questions to make sure that, so now after changing, right, he got set A, set B, set C, set D, something like that. And all the way to maybe set Z. Now what he did was, he made sure that set A, the set A questions, if you throw it to, now right, he has a new batch of students. So he got all the 7-year-olds to sit in the class. Then he said, I'm going to give you all set A. And when he threw them the set A, so I assume that there are 100 primary 1 students. Only 50 of them will be able to do this properly. Meaning they will score a pass, or they will know how to do all the questions correctly. Whereas about 50 of the students will not be able to complete the test perfectly. Then obviously, if you look at all those people doing set B, right? So set B was set to what? 8 years old. So he had children at 8 years old do. If 100 of them, all right, 50 of them. So what happens when you add a question that makes the thing a bit too tough? Like after you test, right? Only 48 students managed to do the set B. Then he said something is wrong with set B. He will adjust again, throw away some too tough questions, and retain the rest, or he inserts some easier thing. Eventually, set B will be adjusted to have only 58-year-olds completing it perfectly. Got it? So it's a lot of work. He did it for primary 1, primary 2, primary 3, because this follows the 7 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old, respectively. With this set of questions, now you have what? Set A is perfect for measuring people with mental age of 7. If you can do everything, means you at least have mental age of 7. Then you go on to do set B. If you can do everything, that means you have at least mental age of 8. You want to do set C. But if you cannot score perfect in set C, that means your mental age is somewhere between 8 to 9. So they will round it and say you are actually at 8, because that's where you are perfect. Got it? So it's a lot of work. Many years later, he developed this, and then they have tools to measure all the mental ages. That's why this formula was invented. So now you can measure mental age. And then at that time, they were like a big hoo-ha, use mental age. Then they realized how to compare. I'll give you one example. Suppose, right, you have a child who is 8 years old and a child that is 10 years old. Now, in terms of mental age, right, so how well they can score. So they convert it to scoring. So suppose this child has a score of 68 marks out of 100, for simplicity's sake. Then this child, right, 10-year-old, score 70 marks out of 100. Now, who is smarter? Who is smarter? Make a guess. But why do we say the 8 years old is smarter? The 8-year-old score lower, right? Why do we say that the 8-year-old is smarter? Yeah, okay, I'm not sure whether online people can see. I've brought the camera closer. All right, but basically there are just 8 years old here, 10 years old there. Then 8 years old is 68 upon 100 for maybe say a maths test. Then 10-year-old has 70 upon 100 on the same maths test. But 10-year-olds, they score 2 points higher. But on campus, people say that, oh, but the 8-year-old is smarter, despite the fact that this is a lower score of 68 versus 70. But the reasoning here given is that, oh, but we would expect the 10-year-old to score much, much higher than 68, which is the correct reasoning. They found that if you have mental age, you still cannot compare people. Because if the mental age is like 2 points higher, but you are 2 years, you have 2 extra years to accumulate information, you shouldn't be just having 2 points higher. So that's why they modified it. After they found out MA, right, they decided to divide it by their chronological age to get a standardized score. So now you can compare across the board, right? So if two people get the same amount of mental age, but one of them is younger, so CA will be smaller, right? For the younger person, you will get a bigger IQ score. So that means the younger person is actually smarter. Okay? But later on, they found that it's still no good, because apparently, right, intelligence is not operating on a linear scale. So you can't really just divide by chronological age and multiply by 100. So ultimately, by today's standards, right, we still don't have a good formula for it. There's no good algorithm. What they do is, and some of these places like Stanford University still holds the rights to Stanford Binet test. Wechsler has been sold to a company called Psychological Assessment Resources Incorporated. So these companies, right, or universities, every so often, they will send out their teams of representatives to negotiate with various countries' government to allow thousands of people to take the test. Then from there, right, they collect the data, they analyze it so that they can adjust the questions, all right, to measure out what is the mental age. Got it? So it's a lot of things. That's why if you go to online and do a test, like sometimes they have all this quick mathematical test, and after you've done it, they tell you, oh, your IQ is 120. Okay, you can throw all this away. They're all not accurate. The real thing, after all this testing, right, it costs a bomb. You send out your teams to measure thousands of people. So all these measurements, so that when you go and take the test yourself, they will know, they will be able to see your score, your age, and then correlate to the actual mental age. This is very costly stuff. They don't release this. So if you want to buy, let's say you say, no, I still want to know, I don't want to go and see a professional. They also won't sell you the tool. For us to buy these kind of tools, right, I actually, like for example, when I was working in the hospital, I actually have to submit a letter that says that I'm working in the hospital, and the hospital requires us to acquire some of the tools for use. So you need to show that you are also trained. So you have to certify that you have necessary, so meaning show your degree, okay, that you have a necessary training, all right, at postgrad level, plus a letter of the organization stating that we wish to acquire this thing. Then they will sell you at exorbitant price the tools. Okay, so lay people won't have access to all this. And when you acquire the tools, there's an agreement to sign that you will not release those things. The results with the individual, yes, but you are not supposed to release the benchmarking data to anybody else. All right, so that's how all these things are guarded. All this internet crap is really just crap. I don't know who can develop all this and con everyone into doing it. Okay, and then there are organizations that refuse to pay, so they develop their own, like Mensa. MENSA, you can go Google what that is. It's an organization that has all the so-called top 2% of the smart people there. They have their own tests, and they demonstrated that it closely approximates to all this standardized testing. All right, but of course because of copyright and money issues, all these PA Incorporated, Stanford, they don't fully recognize Mensa's test as the gold standard test. Okay. So this explains some things. How did we arrive at the curve or the IQ scores? That's the history behind. Now, in the test, I may have you, okay, relate to the ancient formula IQ equals MA over CA times 100. All right, but that is because it's just a test of your understanding of whether you have studied or read this. Okay, that doesn't mean you should go out there and then start to tell everybody that, okay lah, your IQ score very easy to understand one. You can share with people the history, and then it's probably revolving around an improved formula of this ancient thing that you see. Got it? So you don't get fooled by people who are trying to sell you bullshit over the internet. And they have their own whatever measurements. Most of them are not standardized on. Oh, by the way, this last point, before we move on, standard deviation of 15 it's just like how far the score is, right? Like if you move one step, you will reach a different level. Different level meaning what? So these people, right, if you look at this, just now I said these are people who are educationally subnormal. So if you have actually talked to someone, let's say from normal technical stream, so other than because they are what they usually don't like, but you find that when you teach them, you really need to use a different way to communicate with them so that they learn. So that's what it's meant. Every 15 points, you find that the quality of learning becomes different. You need a newer way to reach out to them. Okay? So this is what it's meant. So by standard deviation, statistically, it is just a certain categorization. So I'm not going to go into statistics here. Practically, it means that when you reach out to the next tier of people, you need to talk to them or teach them through another way rather than the usual that we accept, so that they can learn skills just as fast as us. Okay?
So the Singapore government also looking at papers that determine.
Yeah, we still do that. And MOE has worked with PA Inc. to have the benchmarking for Singapore, but they don't release it. But they are worse. Okay, this one recorded, dangerous. The story is actually like that. When PA Inc. some years back, right, PA Inc. came, now it's different, but PA Inc. came, PA Inc. Asked to measure, because then they will have they will also be able to incorporate Singapore intelligence into the global scale. And Singapore government likes it too. So, because then we will know. So then they work together. Singapore government allow thousands of children to be measured. After measuring, right, the government looked at the outcome and decided to withhold the information. So PA Inc., although they signed the agreement, but you can't fight against the government. Yeah. So PA Inc. said, I want the data. Government said, no way. Oh, you did, huh? Maybe you were one of those sent. See, primary 4, now he's like how old? Ah. Yeah, because the test actually tests you for more things than just maths. But if they let you do the maths, you probably did very well, but other areas, so they eventually want an average score too. So they will look at your different, just now you learned it, right? Your different kinds of intelligence plus the overall thing. So a person who will only be deemed genius if they do well in all the categories. Now, so government stop it. Why do you all think they stopped the cooperation with PA Inc? Singapore is promoting itself as an educational hub. Then how can you have, but you notice we are very good with maths and science. We are not so great with our language, right? And somehow our language promote the use of Singlish, la, law, which warps the way people understand it. So how do you promote, how do you sell educational hub like that? Then no business, right? No, they can't. Okay, keep it to yourself, but it's very dangerous. I cannot record it already. Okay, but later there was a rediscussion. Now you know. So there can be this kind of things. It will pervade. You cannot run away from economics and politics. Okay, no matter how good your aims are. All right. And some people ask, what happens if the person cannot talk? Maybe they are born with mute, who are mute, and what to do? There are IQ tests for it too. Take a look at this. Can you tell me which square fits into that box? So let's say we begin with this A, B, C, D, E, F. Which one can fit in to the hole here? Anyone? Certainly it wouldn't take that long, right? Okay, there's no trick question. Then now can answer. So which one? A, B, C, D, E, F. Which one fits into this? Huh? What? I Sompa. Sorry, the foreigners, right? I promise there is no trick question here. Which box fits in? The first one, the A, right? Yeah. Now this is only a simple picture. Eventually, people will go through hundreds and hundreds of all these visual tests. And they have what this guy called Ravens, right? So he developed the progressive matrix test to measure people's IQ if they are, like say they are mute. They can't answer some of the questions that you saw just now. If you go back to this, where do you go? Yeah. So they can't follow through all this because some of these require you to answer, to talk about the answer, right? So do we have? We have. And furthermore, they also say that, in some cultures, people don't study like maybe say, if you look at Singapore and Africa, the syllabus will be different. So it's not fair to put them through Stanford-Binet test, where some questions are like very academic based. So they choose to use Ravens as a universal test. But of course, there will still be complaints about it, criticisms. Like, how can you be sure that, verbally these people will do well? Because this is a pure visual test. All right? But there's nothing perfect. You want then just do both and see if there's a need to adjust the Stanford-Binet test using the Ravens test. Okay? All right, question. So this part you read about it. I already mentioned what standardization is, like all the standard deviation and all this. And how we standardize is divided by the chronological age, right? Then we have, if you, just now, if it's like too cramped up, here is a scale that sends out and tells you what are some of the percentage of people fitting into things. Then finally, please put a star on this slide too. I'm going to talk about the Flynn effect in a nutshell. Remember just now I said IQ or your ability, your potential to solve problem, it will not suddenly improve across generations. Evolution takes tens of thousands of years minimum. So the thing is, however, right, once we have the IQ measurement invented ever since 1910s, it has been shown that your grandfather, okay, let's just look at it from your great-grandfather to your grandfather to your father and to you. It was found that, right, somehow the strange thing is that every generation, right, it's like one tier jump. So if you test your great-grandfather, great-grandfather would have the IQ of a mental retardate. So he wouldn't be able to solve problems at all, But then your great-grandfather it cannot be that all our great-grandfathers are mental retardates. And then our grandfather would have what? Educationally subnormal. But it cannot be one. Look at Lee Kuan Yew. He would be in a generation of, for people like in the 40s, 50 years old, he would be like a grandfather to them. But you don't see Lee Kuan Yew as someone with educationally subnormal. In fact, he would outdo a lot of people. So how is it that every generation there is like a one-tier jump to IQ? Is it because humans are evolving at super speeds? Or they eventually realize no. It's because of these 4 things. So please, you put a star on, oops, oh, I can't highlight it. So I'll just point with the arrow. Okay, apparently your potential, maybe it's biologically ingrained as well, can be adjusted by what external tools, such as what? Such as giving you education. So you are now exposed to information, so you have your potential to solve problems, right, becomes enhanced. Why? Because modern schools came about. Because people started to promote the use of libraries, and newspaper became an everyday thing. And then later on they have TVs, and today we have internet. So exposure to information is the big deal. All right. Then of course, obviously, a lot more countries are going into what? Into becoming developed and developing nation status, which means access to food and nutrition becomes less of a problem. So the people's mental capacity, whilst it's measured that they have certain potential, but now the potential has increased. And it is not due to evolution. So we are not really a different or an alien to our grandfathers. It's just simply that we are now able to have a better start point than people in the past. Okay? And of course, with better measurements, right? Even if you look at WISC, it's now in its version 4. 3 for the children one, 4 for the adults. Okay? So with sharper measurements, we are able to get the more accurate scores. But this one is just mainly for checking the IQ score. You still have to fall back on what? To really help ourselves, it is what? Of course, people are afraid that, but my child is still so young. How can my child be fully exposed to internet? I'm not talking about like that. Certain information are still harmful when you don't know how to use them, right? So like what? Like terrorists, happily just bombing people away, right? So you can always use bombs for excavation, like how Nobel intended it, but it's used for destructive purposes too, for people who refuse to think that the world can be made a better place. So they go into war, right? Guess what I'm talking about. Okay, but before you start to enjoy your mango pudding, listening to this information about how people misuse weapons, I'm talking about Putin, of course. Now, okay, so last bit, this part also you need to put a star. I'm going into multiple intelligences. So just now, I'm very sure you understand what's IQ. But there may be an error with understanding it. Okay, now what's this? Now, somewhere along the right, people, okay, let me go back to this. It's easier to understand with this picture. Now, consider this scenario. You need to look here. Oh wait, I used arrow. Suppose, right, someone is very good with doing maths, okay? But the person end up with road traffic accident. Then later they measure, they find that the person cannot do basic arithmetic. They got problem trying to count. Now my question to all of you, including people online, once a person survives a road traffic accident, right? And then, right, you find that this part is no longer performing well. So the blue color got receded. Now, let's consider other areas. Do you think the spatial ability will also regress? Yes, no. So let's put it to a vote. Online people, you just check on your whether, all right, you agree to this. My question is, a survivor of road traffic accident has been found to have poorer arithmetic intelligence or skill. Therefore, we can conclude that the spatial skill will also drop. Do you think that, if you agree, say yes. If you disagree, say no. Okay, people here on campus, we can see. So, show of hands, right? If you think it's yes, raise your hand. If you think it's a no, wait, let's do it 2 ways. Yes, raise your hand, please. Okay, you regress to no, raise your hand. Everybody raise their hand. You cannot sit on the fence. What do you think? Make a guess. You think, no, it will not, this thing will not regress, or what? So if this thing becomes lesser because it's no longer so great after accident, right? So this is like original. Then after accident, this thing is like lesser ability. Will this, then if you go and measure the person, right, will the spatial ability, let's say, also drop? No. So in class, we have two people who thinks that if the arithmetic intelligence drops, the other intelligence will also follow suit, it will drop. Drop how much? Never mind, just it will drop. 3 people say no, only arithmetic is affected, so spatial may be spared. Now, if you've gone to the hospital, you actually see two groups of people. Some people, after surviving an accident, a lot of other skills become affected. Some people, right, after recuperation, you find that maybe they can no longer talk as well like before, but they can still do their maths. So it's like no change in other skills. So then which picture is correct? But the thing is, there is a large number of people with intact skills. It may recede a little bit, but it's not like this. Now, not like what as bad as the other skill that's lost. In other words, right, suppose someone got an injury and this totally can no longer do maths again. Now, if he no longer can do this, we should expect what? A lot of, because remember, this arithmetic is also influenced by little g. So little g should be compromised. If this is compromised, you should find that the other skills should be equally compromised because they all take their orders from little g. Right? The only reason why little g will recede is because it's powering this. But when we see this is damaged, it will definitely affect the central thing. Okay? It's like, if you cannot picture this, think of the airport runway. If we are bombed, if you bomb part of the runway, the control tower cannot send people onto that runway anymore. So the control tower's function will have to drop, even if it is intact, right? Because it has to regroup, reorganize. And the entire airport performance will drop, even when you have one runway got bombed, right? Because the little g cannot function as normal again. Moreover, little g is now what? Coping very hard with extra work. One runway down means you have so many more airplanes still on the remaining runway, right? So it reasons that if one skill is gone or two skills are gone, little g will not be able to work as well as before, so dead end. But the thing is, this guy called Howard Gardner, so it's somewhere down your slides. In his research, he was a neuropsychologist. So when he worked with brain injured patients, he found that this doesn't seem to be true, because he had many hundreds of patients, right? Where when they were first hurt, you see a thing drop, but after training, they come back. So their original skill may not come back, but the other areas were spared. So he said, no, in that case, right, it goes against the current conceptualization. Maybe in this world, there is no little g. Maybe all the stats tests, right, from Spearman was erroneous. And he was a very strong advocate that please throw out little g, there is no such thing. Meaning, throw away the last 100 years of research and work. And he claims that it's all wrong. It does not explain the situation in how people recover from brain injury. So of course, this is a very shocking thing. You are asking all the people, you are going to discredit all the people who went on beforehand, and you're going to tell people to, let's just forget about all our 100 years of research and work. How to accept this, right? So I'm talking about this guy, Gardner. Eventually, he said that the world should just recognize multiple intelligence. Like we realize that there's this concept called, this is not little g, I highlight again. Watch here. This central thing here is not little g. Gardner never supported little g. To him, it's just various intelligences. Okay? Then, he said that, okay? To him, we should just focus on training people, all right? based on whatever they want to acquire, we should focus more on that. So if you are a dancer, obviously you should go to school and learn all the different things so you can communicate with people, and you reserve the ability to maybe change your field in the future. But right now, your focus should be on maybe, for example, bodily kinesthetic intelligence, which stress on what? How well you control your body and how well you analyze movements of your body. So if you want to be a pianist, you should focus on developing your musical intelligence. Got it? Now, of course, this is a very extreme way of thinking about things. We would like to think that humans are more rounded, but it is true, there seems to be a lot of contribution from multiple intelligences. So ultimately, right, Gardner is pretty much stands alone. There are other people who propose multiple intelligence concept, but not so extreme like Gardner. So this guy called Sternberg, he believed that, I don't think I have the picture here. Yeah. Okay. He believed that, okay, I don't know how you're going to type this in because it's usually drawn in a triangle for me. Where's my, yeah. Okay. You probably can only type in serially, or maybe you can try use the annotate, no, the whiteboard thing. I think there's some function like that, not sure. But then worst case, just type it serially. Okay, so we have something like this. According to Sternberg, he felt that intelligence should be considered in this way. There is something called analytical intelligence. There is creativity, but this is not the usual creativity that I understand. So let me just write it down first. Creative intelligence, and there is practical intelligence. So let's look at the easiest to understand first. All those skills that you are able to show in school and doing well in school, that's all coming from analytical intelligence. So some of the skills under this will be what? Ability to reason in a logical way. Ability to handle mathematical operations. Then creativity is your intelligence, your potential to solve problems when presented with novel situations. New situations, right? So what that means is, if you are sent to work, let's say, right, you're in your company, okay, your company decided to expand their business to Ukraine. Now, but Ukraine is now in a dangerous position, right? So but your company supplies medical and emergency equipment. So the thing is, they want to send you there to set up shop, all right, because there's a great demand for such things. Now, this is a new situation. And almost everyone in Singapore had never been through war. So when you go there, you have to tackle a lot of new things, correct? How do you ensure your company profits? So you need to solve a lot of problems that are seen for the first time. Then why is this related to arts? An artist drawing something, he can be drawing something original. Maybe he will have learned from other people before about art, but he has to create a new original piece of art. So every time a new masterpiece, whether it's music, it's drawing or sculpturing, it's new. So this kind of ability, all right, the ability to go into a new situation or create something new, because you are able to work on your prior learned information very quickly and evaluate them quickly, is part of creative intelligence. Finally, the ability for people to be very practical about things. So this solves new situation, the ability to incorporate new information. This part, right, is the ability to put all the information that you have on hand, so you mix and match them to generate solution. But it need not be totally new. But the thing is, you are very fast at solving practical problems. Maybe because you're what? You are very street smart, they call it, right? So a street smart person is not always creative, but they tend to what? They tend to evaluate the situation in a broader way. Okay, they tend to see the bigger picture. This is layman's way of talking about things. Basically, what they do is they are able to what? To evaluate more pieces of information at the same time, and even obscure information at the same time when compared to other people who are like maybe more analytical type. Okay, question? Of course, you need a combination of them to be good in this world. So if you are in the center, you are probably an all-rounder. Very few people are that. So some people are more like study smart. So they can, of course, they study smart doesn't mean that they can't work. They go into the lab, they still have to do something practical, right? So they may be inclined towards here. So they are analytical, but they also have some levels of practical. So that's why this where they stand is not like totally at the apex here. Got it? So different professionals, different people are all hovering within here. It's just which side you emphasize on. Okay? So that's our understanding of our ability to solve problems. It's not a pure thing. With what? Play? What kind of play? The theatrical play or just play games? Play. Yeah, it is. Because when they are doing it, right, actually what they are trying to do is they are testing out a new idea. You may not have a chance to test out a new idea. If you form a company, right, you cannot say I form, fail, then form again. You will run out of capital eventually. You've got to be once formed, right, it must work. So most people will rely on what has already been working. They use it, they refine a bit, and then they do it. But this part will require you to draw a little bit from creativity, but you still have to. But most people are not going to have a total radical shift in doing their business, right? But if you are an artist or what, then you'll be here. It's okay to tear away your lousy piece of art. So suppose you consider, I think the hue here is not right. You tear away the canvas, you restart. No problem. Right? So what Sternberg did, right, was actually useful too, because he managed to show that there is such a thing, that there's such a thing as multiple intelligences. In fact, right, one of his most astounding experiments was that he got a bunch of students. They are all like pre-university kind of level, and he trained them, okay, what his training is not the standard like lecture style. He measured their intelligences, which one they tend to emphasize on. Then he divided them into 3 classes. Then each class are trained in a way where it emphasizes the use of their own preference in intelligence. So those academically inclined, right, he would go through the usual way, like lecture style, all this. And those people who are like practical, right, they instead, he made them go a few trips, all this. Then at the end of 2 months, all right, they were tested. So these people went through the same as you did, foundation side, except they finished the course in 2 weeks rather than 3 months. And the surprising thing was the average score, right, from all of them was that they score above 80 out of 100 for their exam, which demonstrates that if you teach them, all right, according to this, you focus on their intelligence, they are able to perform much better than the usual. All right, because most of the time you find that for any psych exam, the average score hovers around what, somewhere between 60, around 60 plus minus some bits. Okay, so there'll be a few who are outstanding, but now in his way, right, almost everybody is outstanding. So therefore it works. There is a thing, so this theory about multiple intelligence is there. That's why practically it can be made to work. But the problem is, why don't we do this in our education system? Is because it's impossible. When you divide children into, like, some people go to the field, some people stay in class, you sure gonna complain. Sorry, you sure will get complained. Like some parents say, why that student get a chance to go field trip, go see all the people working outside. Why my child have to stay in class? So you don't have a standardized way of teaching. So people won't be happy unless they learn all this. But you look at Singapore, 5 million people, only 5 people are in class, right? So we need people to better understand this. It will take at least a few decades. When people know, then they start to accept that, yes, everybody can be trained differently. And right now, people are already starting to understand this, but they are not willing to accept newer practices yet. It will still take time, okay? Oh, sorry, I say 5 people in class, right? I'm sorry, I must have omitted, poor people online. They thought I've abandoned them. I didn't, okay? It was a mistake, slip of tongue. So, but we are all still minority compared to what? The 5.5 million people around, right? Okay, so that's about it. Then if you ask the question, where did all this multiple intelligence, the idea started? It's actually way back then. Sometime in the 50s, 60s already, the first fellow is called Raymond Cattell. He proposed that we shouldn't just look at it like there's a little g, there should be more. But at the 60s, he only discovered 2 types of things, which was fluid intelligence and crystallized intelligence. Okay, you can read about it. Maybe I cannot let you just read about it, because we'll put a star there. Put a star on these 3 slides, this one, and this one. So if there's a star, then I got to elaborate. And what's the time now? Time for break. Oh my, time for break. Okay, I finished this one, we go for break. All right, this slide. What Cattell found out was that, okay, I think it's easier to understand it this way. Now, if you are at grandfather status, right? So suppose you are now at 65 years old. Okay, not 70, just 65. I make it better lah. Okay, 65. And you have a teenage grandchild, 15 years old. Oh, you are apart by 50 years old, right? Now, so let's say both of you want to learn Russian language. Okay? Now, who do you think will be able to master the Russian language first? You, 65-year-old, at the grandfather, grandmother status, or your grandchild at 15 years old? Now, don't say that, oh, I have to work, and because if you say you have to work 8 hours a day, your child has to go to school 8 hours a day. Okay, let's ignore all this. But who, generally speaking? What were we taught about generally, right? Who can actually master the language first? The elderly person or the younger person? The younger person, because they learn faster, right? But it's wrong. Now, not wrong all the time, but for this, it's wrong. Why? Now, it was demonstrated back then that certain fields of study, certain skills require you to think very quickly. Like for example, maybe let's say you decided to pick up further maths, so which is an advanced form of mathematics, and the assessment is that you got to finish a paper in 3 hours, or very urgent. In this case, your grandchild will probably outsmart you when it comes to performance. But when it comes to language, you have an edge. Why? Now let's look at it. How do young people usually learn stuff when it comes to language? Now you think back, when you attended English lesson, how were you taught in primary school? Ask you to memorize the grammar, right? So rote learning, meaning exposure to the language structure, and then go for tests. So language structure, go for tests. No wonder that every time we do our composition and our summary, right, you find that seems like no improvement. So those good students with English will always fly high. Then those people who are like better in their what mother tongue and all this, they fly kite. Correct? Very difficult to have improvement, because we went through rote learning style. But if you look at elderly people, when they want to learn a new language, will they just go and memorize the grammar? Or might they be doing some other things? I'm not sure whether you have experience in this, but if you have heard before, how do people who are like 50, 60 years old, right, when they want to pick up a new language, what do they do in the first place? They go to a group, they find people and talk about it. But what if it's like a rare language in Singapore, like Russian is rare? So you don't really have that many groups. What can you do? You look, but okay, they research, you look into the internet about, they watch videos, they listen to it, right? But when they listen to it, do they only listen to the way it's spoken? Not really, you know. A lot of people learn it, what? They decided to listen to the music first. They watch the video, they may not understand, and then they look at the subtitle, or they read up the culture, they look at the food. They don't just go through the grammar structure. In fact, that will probably come last. But that's the whole idea. learning is multifaceted. And we make use of interesting information because the elderly person has more life experiences. And for some of them, it's like reading, some of them is like watching movie. So they make use of all this to learn. So for subject matters that require you to rely heavily on past experiences, people who are older will have more life experiences to tell them which way to learn it better. And they make better progress than younger children who are limited because they only learn through what? Rote learning. And that's the only way they do it. All right? So what Cattell found out was that if you have to rely on past learning, which is something he labeled as crystallized intelligence, all those things that you've learned over the years and crystallized and summarized in your head, those kind of subject matter, if you have higher crystallized intelligence because you have lived longer, you will outperform the other guy. If, however, you are learning a subject matter that requires abstract reasoning, heavy abstract reasoning, lots of speed in thinking, all right, and heavy use of not just abstract reasoning but also logical reasoning, then the younger person would win out. Why? Because part of the reason is that fluid intelligence heavily relies on perfect synaptic connection. But elderly people, right, once you pass about age 30, you will start to experience micro strokes in your brain. You may not have a major stroke that will not make you go down like, or half side of body cannot move. But as you age, your brain performance will drop. So that's why, right, later on when they looked at Nobel Prize winners, there are further studies, people who came after this, they decided to look at, let's say, Nobel Prize winners. And they found that all those people who win mathematics prize, right, but mathematics is very abstract. All the people who win mathematics prize, their age is usually about 30 years old. Then after that, they seem to have no more breakthroughs in talking about maths. They are professors, but they don't have further powerful stuff to show the world. But all those people who would rely on like medicine and chemistry, right, you need to rely on past experiences. The winners of all the Nobel Prizes are usually in 60 years old range. Before the onset of a lot of strokes, like 70 years old, but old enough where they have a lot of life experiences. Got it? So this is true. That's why then you say, then what about, I can't learn when I'm older. You can blame your teachers and your mothers for that. Okay? I'm kidding. But we were taught to believe that elderly people are slow learners. When you believe that, you will already have stunted your learning ability. If you cast that aside, then you will be able to fully inherit the power of your crystallized intelligence. If you want to do well in maths, then I think, yeah, you really need to put in effort. But if you want to do a lot of effort, but if you want to do well in, let's say, language, you just need to put in effort rather than a lot of effort, and you should be able to still do as well, if not better than a youngster. So look at the things you want to learn. Which do they fall into? If they rely on a lot of past learning, then stop believing that old people can't do well. All right, then you will learn much faster. I don't have time to go through all the various experiments, but there are a lot of studies showing many ways that old people don't always learn slower. In fact, they can learn faster. It's all about strategizing and stop believing in the limiting belief that older people can't learn. That depends on if you are dealing with a very novel kind of art thing, then yeah, you will have lesser creative work as you age. Okay, but it depends. I'm talking about artwork. If you are into, let's say, right, you're a researcher and you have thought about many years on how to let's say make your diagnostic machine better to pick out, let's say, lung cancer, then that's different. Because with newer inventions, you have better, sharper tools, and you will learn from those. You will be able to come up with a machine much faster than a person who just started out doing his PhD. Okay? All right, let's go for a break. It's probably 8:40, 8:50. Okay, I'll see you at around 9:10. All right? Oh, luckily the rest are all simple stuff. Okay. So this was what you saw. It's a summary of, in table format, what we talked about just now, right? Then, now will IQ be affected by, let's say, genetics and inheritance? The answer is yes. In fact, it has been shown that for humans, right, about now this, although the number is quite high, but no need to be too badly influenced by it. It's been found that IQ is correlated by 0.85. What is that? So it doesn't mean that it's 85% contributed by your parents, but if we work it out, there's about 65% that your physical structure, right, that determines all those things about your IQ is determined by what the parents give you. But just because it's above 50% doesn't mean that, wow, like I have very little say. Not really. Because the plasticity, right, which is the ability for your brain to rewire itself, the impact of it is more than just inheriting some of these things. So maybe if an animal, right, any animal, or maybe I shouldn't say any animal, maybe not including whales, dolphins, and certain monkey species. Maybe for a lot of the other animals, if intelligence is, if their amount of intelligence, there's no way to know because we don't have a good measurement for it. But suppose they are like us humans. They inherit 60 over to 70% of their intelligence from their parents. Then you find that there's nothing much that they can do because they are not equipped to learn like humans. So it's pretty much stuck. For humans, right, the ability to learn will override a lot of all this inheritance. So whilst it may be difficult for the person to adopt something new, it's not impossible. For animals, it's kind of impossible. Sometimes certain things are fixed means they are fixed. Okay? Like if you watch, I have cats at home, so if you watch certain cats' behavior, like they will clean their faces. So this is actually inherited. They don't have to see a mother cat doing this in order to learn how to wash their faces. It's hardwired into their genes and their neurology. But you find that they will never have another way to learn how to wipe their faces. All right? So somewhere in time, their species got a mutation where this thing was passed on and it's now like that. But for humans, we have many ways to keep ourselves clean. All right? Of course, the limitations will be, you still can't, if you say, I want to fly, you can't because you don't have wings. Your bodily structure is not equipped for flying. Like in birds, right, their bones are hollow, so it's lighter. So certain environmental and bodily, right, anatomical limitations, of course they exist. But overall, we have more than one way to try and improve our situation and solve problems. So all these slides from here, right, and I just flip down, here, all these heredity and environment. In a nutshell, they are lengthy, it's for you to read, okay? But in a nutshell, the answers, the main points will be, intelligence is heavily influenced by inheritance. For humans, all right, they show a correlation of 0.5 out of 1, that the genes that you got the genes that you receive from your parents will influence you, but then that 0.5 does not work out to be percentages. You still have to convert it. All right. So percentage-wise, it's low. It's about 65 to 70%. Despite the fact that this is huge, our plasticity will override a lot of this impact. Okay, that's the gist. Now, there is one other thing that requires our attention in cognitive psychology. It used to be not in until after 2000. Why? Because of the heavy contribution of cognitive psych towards the area of artificial intelligence. And then this is also a big field. Nowadays, you see everywhere there's AI. All right. So we are not going to look at all the modern stuff about AI. Right? I think if you are interested in where we are heading, you can Google. It's all on YouTube. the interview between Google and many other organizations, they have their own AIs. Well, I can't remember Google's name. It's not Google. It's not the one that you would call into your phone. Google, what's the time now? That Google. It has a name. Often I cannot recall the name. Alexa is which companies? Amazon. And
Siri?
No, it's Siri, Alexa. All these are based on AI, but they are really just an AI app to try and automate how you use phone. The real AI I'm talking about are those that tells you jokes, interact with you like they are humans. And if you actually don't see and you're not informed, you might actually think that you are maybe using WhatsApp, right, to talk to just somebody on the other, and somebody meaning some human body at the other end. Okay? So we already have this kind of very high level AIs that can tell you jokes and literally pass off as a human. And of course, there are work undergoing to try and give them a very human-like body, but the idea is very heavily rejected because humans really don't like to talk to another human-looking machine. They roll it out. It's realistic, 70-80% realistic like a human, but once the human interacts with it, they like hold back. Only those those are techno fans maybe, but average out, not so. But it's unavoidable. Okay, basically we will be taken over. Yeah. No, it's not. They mimic emotions very well. Some of the very advanced ones, they literally laugh with you. It's because of our fear. The fear that a creation is like us. Now, so you see, humans have this fear for a long time. You look at our artwork. Okay, let me push back. Once upon a time, what's a scary drawing? Before Hollywood made, let's say, aliens terrible, and then now the anime, right? Then you have some weird creatures where they have huge mouths, sharp teeth, kind of thing, not even aliens. Before this kind of things, let's look at artwork dating back 1,000, 2,000 years ago. What is a scary drawing of some creature? The devil, but the devil is a new invention, no? The current devil that we can picture. In the past, let's look at several cultures. In Chinese cultures, we have the horse face and the cow's face, right? But human body. They are here to hook your soul. We have from European culture, the Minotaur, bull head, human body. And at one point in time, mermaids, right, before it was fantasized to be something cool, it was also scary. Where you have fish body, human upper torso. As long as it's a grotesque merge of something that we do not know, and naturally we are afraid of it. We have always this fear of the unknown, all right, and especially when somebody depicts the unknown in something that is uncommon, the fear will be triggered, because this fear is necessary for our survival. To be curious, but in very maintaining high caution over unknown objects. Otherwise, you happily just go and then got eaten by predators. Sorry, the Singlish there. Right? That wouldn't be worth our while. So it's hardwired in us. And today, right, we are more advanced. We start to make it abstract, right, what we are afraid of. AI is something that's unknown. We are very used to interacting with another human, but once you tell the person that this is not human, yet it's behaving like, it's like combining the animal head with a human body. That kind of principle again. So instinctively, it makes a lot of people start to become wary and afraid. This can, of course, be resolved by two things: multiple exposure. So people keep seeing these kind of things, interact with AIs, they start to become comfortable. Two, if they receive some benefit from it. So you notice that people are not so afraid of Siri, not so afraid of Alexa, but then they also don't see Siri and Alexa in their natural form. All right, but if they make it into human-like figure walking around, you find that some people will start to hold back again until they have sufficient exposure. right? So this is going to be, whatever I'm saying now, it will eventually become, it will manifest in real world. And that is not surprising why, you see, we already have the ability to make some robots around up there, right? Look more human, but we don't want. The patrols, now it's actually easier to make robots, right, move around with legs, because they will overcome, if they cannot do on all fours, right, then all twos, right, just do on fours. They will overcome a lot of terrain issues. But you notice our garden patrols, the patrolling robots on the gardens, all this, all wheeled, because it resembles something we're used to, cars, bicycles, things with wheels. Yeah, the only thing they make it lifelike but still retain artificial, that you know it's not human, is that they give it a smiley face, but it's projected through LED, right? So it's still a bit of time before humans can accept all this, right? Because of our basic instinct. Now, but let's look at what is the impact. Over here, I have left you to read plenty of things. The examination won't have so much. It is basically for your understanding, all right? So what is AI? Now, if we move out, right, to take a look at this, we see, let me open up everything. We see that AI is really a system, meaning it's some kind of machine, all right? But it's a complex machine. So it's a system made to mimic human behavior. The main question to ask is, mimicry means monkey see, monkey do, right? Is it really, because when we talk about animals and humans, when we see the behavior, we say that it comes from deep within the animal or the human itself. It's like spontaneously generated. But when something copies us or copy an animal, we will wonder, is it literally an originally sparked off behavior, or it's just a copy? So if it's a truly original thing that the machine is reacting to the environment, not because it's copying or instructed to, then we will say that the AI is successful. So we need a test to show that whatever is the output, whether it's action-based or verbal-based, whether the output is original, it's not, I mean, it could work just like humans based on learning, but after the learning is done, it must still create that action on its own. Then it will be deemed as perfect AI.
The AI can think,
yeah.
can process, then you will be
But okay, this is good. Why is it scary then? Why is it scary?
as human, you worry that you will be taking over.
Of course, our jobs are already being taken over. Didn't you see how many people have lost their jobs?
Yeah.
But a lot of people have lost their jobs. Our quality of living has not dropped. So then we come back to the question again. What's so scary? Notice, so often I cannot recall your name. Sunny. Those people online, I didn't have a chance to turn around the camera. Sunny was saying, wow, then it's very scary. But when probed, right, he also had difficulty saying what's so scary. He did come up with a useful reason, like, you know, our jobs will be taken over. It is true, it has already happened. Machines took over our jobs since 1700s. They started and they are still doing it. But our quality of living has been improving nonetheless. So this reason cannot be the reason, but you find that actually, not only Sunny, a lot of people are echoing the same reason. It all stems from the primal fear, that when we are seeing something that is us but not really us, the first automatic thought is, it's an unfair advantage. Why is this machine who can do things faster, not me, and taking over stuff, and so we start to rationalize. But this is a perfect demonstration of the rejection of AI. Now, I'm not saying just because I sound like I accept it, doesn't mean that I agree that AI is very good. No. There are still dangers from it, of course. And we are not even sure that we can actually patch that danger on time. But that will be beyond. Then later you say I go into sci-fi. It's not, there are risks about it. But we really don't have enough information and data to project how it would be used. Okay, if you ask me, I would say that we will be taken over, but it will not be like Terminator show, like they start a war. Instead, right, we will be stupid enough to start the war ourselves and need their help, and eventually we still get supplanted because we are the ones who start the war. Somebody eating a lot of pudding, right, already doing that. Okay, Now, so back to here, let's not digress. We need something to show that whatever is the action generated, it's original. It could learn, but when it initiates the action, it has to be well weighed out, and therefore it's original. So is there such a thing? So this is the box, the model that tells us about it. AI must be a system that will what? That will have thoughts, behavior, and is rational. Now then the thing is, but some people say, but emotions are not rational. This is wrong. Emotions are not always irrational. Emotions is just another human language that informs us of what's happening out there. Like if you experience sadness, it's probably because you have lost something useful or something important to you. That's why your body tells you to cry. The crying then tells you that, and the heartache tells you that, yes, I've lost something. It was a primary part of the mind, the brain that came first, but it wasn't so specific as to tell you what. So later on, we evolved the thinking brain to narrow down the scope and be very specific in noting down what we have lost, even abstractly reasoning about it. Okay? So notice this is not irrational. You have to lose something before you start to feel sadness. Rational. Right? You don't anyhow cry. So those people who anyhow cry, we usually call them what? They have mental health challenges. See, we already recognize that emotions can be rational. Okay? When they are not rational, we note that this person has something wrong. We don't treat them like normal anymore. We give them help. All right? So that's about the AI. And eventually, we are looking at all these processes to be incorporated into machines. Now, all these things, right, that are shaded in gray are all contributions from the area of psychology into the entire AI concept. Therefore, what you have learned about memory is there. We call it hard disk. Then you talk about, oh, then I remember sensory memory. It's also there. Cache memory in computer. Then humans demonstrate another thing. We tend to think of several things at the same time because we can multitask. We have divided attention. Remember? Machines can be wired to do so. That's why normal computers are not AI, but an AI usually is a neural network processor. Meaning what? They have several computers hooked up to process information at the same time, which is what humans are capable of doing. We process information, several aspects of the information at the same time. So neural network processors also do that. But they need a larger space, they need more energy. That's without doubt. Because our technology so far now is that we can't have a very tiny microprocessor to do everything. So we hook up several computers to do that. The only difference is the newer one called the quantum processing machine. So I'm not going to go into it. You can read up on what's quantum machines. So these machines, they work extremely fast. They have their own advantage of serially processing information like the old computers, but at millions of times, actually billions of times faster than the best PC you have now. At the same time, they also work on information from multiple angles, just like how any human or some animals would do processing information. Okay? And this is expected to take over us, actually, the quantum machines. So whilst there's a lot of research to look into it, they are also looking at how to stop it, but the part on preventing is great because nobody knows what's going to happen next, so they can't really prevent it properly. And there are a lot of money to be churned out from better machines, so the progress in machine learning is much faster. Okay, so that's the deal. It sounds like sci-fi, I know. Now this sci-fi is becoming more and more realistic. Now let's watch what the general opinion about it is. I have skipped one video today, which is Gartner's interview on multiple intelligence, but I will load it up and you can watch the full clip on your own. Because what I can show is only the excerpt to prove a point, but I already explained that. So when you watch the video on your own, just watch the full version, okay? Okay, where are the videos? Oh yeah. And by the way,
reasons to build AI. There might even be some reasons to fear AI. We're gonna.
by the way, this is already dated 8 to 9 years ago. So of course, the opinions would have changed by now. Some of the things are actually still in place, especially like when we talk about the fear, all right? And it's now well tested that this fear is real. So, but you know, it started, this hypothesis all started about 15, 20 years back. Then 9 years ago, this video came out.
There are lots of reasons to build AI. There might even be some reasons to fear AI. We're gonna have better diagnosis through AI. We're gonna have better treatment through robots that can do surgeries that human beings can't. It's gonna replace taxi drivers for better or worse, worse for the employment, better for safety. Anytime you think that computers are involved, ultimately artificial intelligence is or will be playing a role. But I think it's a very serious worry. What will happen as AI gets better and better? Once somebody develops a good AI program, it doesn't just replace one worker, it might replace millions of workers. When it comes to consciousness in AI, let's say you build a simulation of a human brain. Is it ethical, for example, to turn off the plug? Is it ethical to switch it on and off?
I know that you and Frank were planning to disconnect me, and I'm afraid that's something I cannot allow to happen.
What if you take a human mind and upload it into one of these machines? The other concern that people rightfully have about AI is what happens if they decide that we're not useful anymore? I think we do need to think about how to build machines that are ethical. The smarter the machines get, the more important that is.
Don't worry. Even if I evolve into Terminator, I'll still be nice to you.
The problems that present us, like the employment problem and the safety problem, they're going to come, and it's just a matter of time. But there's so many advantages to AI in terms of human health, in terms of education and so forth, that I'd be reluctant to stop it. But even if I did think we should stop it, I don't think it's possible. There's so much economic incentive behind it. And I've heard an estimate that strong AI would be worth $1 trillion a year. So even if, let's say, the US government forbade development in kind of the way that it developed new stem cell lines, that would just mean that the research would go offshore. It wouldn't mean that it would stop. The more sensible thing to do is to start thinking now about these questions like the future of employment and how to build the ethical robots. I don't think we can simply ban it. My guess is that as AI gets better and better, it's actually going to look less like people. AI is going to be its own kind of intelligence.
All right, let's pause here. You can watch the full clip at home. Now, why do I show you this thing? There is an important keyword mentioned, right? Ethics of AI should be the ethics related to human society, human living too. Now, what do you think of, like for example, right, countries, although we are young, like Singapore, we are now also starting to look after animals. Last time there was no law about animal abuse. The last 10 years it came up, and then it has accelerated in its pace on being more severe on criminals who work against animals. Such are ethical behavior, isn't it? Why do we have this kind of things popping up everywhere in the world? Why do we need people like all of us to support this kind of movement? Where do you think this kind of human behavior, overall human behavior, is going to go? To safeguard our future. So all these things that are ethical will be programmed into your daily AI, or else all the Hollywood predictions will come true. Okay? So there is a reason why psychology is not just simply finding out, like what you learned before, structuralists, right? Finding out what makes us human in terms of behavior. In this case, the functionalist talking about the purpose. The purpose is to safeguard our future so that we don't go into extinction thanks to our own creation. Okay? So there is a reason why there is also work on what? On compassion, on forgiveness. All these are part and parcel of the components made use of by cognitive side to throw, all right, to offer, not to throw, I think I should use a more appropriate, to offer to programmers, to roboticists, and then they work it into the system. And remember, this is no longer just robotics, because why? The final version of all this AI, they are going to exist in the internet. There's no way you can hunt them down, there's no way you can kill them without destroying ourselves. But whatever we give to them is how they are, you see, we have waged war over thousands of years to learn that it's better not to wage war, except one guy who loves to eat pudding, all right? So why have the robots and the machines and the artificial intelligence reinvent and repeat this part of history? Okay? And if you say that it's for survival, even the meat we eat, right, we have to kill last time, we no longer have to. Singapore being one of the countries that actually start with cloning of meat, right? Of course, there is impossible meat. They make meat from protein sources, and now they can restructure all this plant-based protein to become like meat-based. So you get everything without having to kill. So we are humane now. And the opportunity to be humane will just increase. So the next thing is, how do we translate all this for our creation so that we can coexist? So this is actually a call to what? To consider all these green-friendly things, all these ethical things, and incorporate into our daily living so that we will have the habit of supporting that infrastructure when it becomes available online. Don't think that it's just because people program it in you will use. Remember, we have inherent fear against unknown. So unless we become used to it, otherwise how to inherit the thing that our predecessors, invent? Okay? That is also the very same with the start of this topic. Education system is different from in the past is because they realize that the economics and technology has grown so much, you need people to use tools. That's why modern schools are only invented about 200 years ago, where they have standardized syllabus, they train teachers to teach in a certain way, where everywhere you go, right, if you have learned maths, you go anywhere in the world, people will understand you because we all learn maths almost the same way. And the same way, the only thing we retain will be what? Like maybe our mother tongue. So the language is different, all right? But the way we talk about certain things are the same. Everywhere you go, you ask people in their way, or you will show a picture of a toilet, they will know where to point directions to you. So these are the things I am talking about in expanding the field of psychology and especially in cognitive psychology, okay? So today we also look at the applications of intelligence, the impact, and let me turn this off. Now, then of course, we ask one more thing. What about learning? Okay? Because now that we know we have the capacity to solve problems, you are like, now you know for example, you're a supercomputer. But if you cannot have any input, it's also useless. So this is the next set of slides. Let's take a look at how far we can push the idea of learning. It is not only limited to humans, right?
The two pigeons are at either end of a small ping-pong table. One pigeon pecks the ball as it comes toward him and knocks it toward the other pigeon. Other pigeon pecks the ball back across the table. If it goes past one pigeon, the other pigeon can eat, and if it goes the other way, the other pigeon eats. So that there is it's a real game. The pigeon is reinforced for a cross-court shot if that is what gets the ball past his opponent.
Okay? So, what is the implication of this video? That people like Feng Tianwei will be very sad if we actually train a lot of these pigeons, right? If you don't know who is Feng Tianwei, she is the ping pong athlete representing Singapore. Animals can be trained to play and to do a lot of tricks. What about humans? When we apply all these learning principles well. And of course then, if you think back, we just finished with AI. All these principles need not be trained to the machine, instead it's programmed in. But after programming in, you still need to expose them to environments so that they will refine it. That's the idea. So let's look at what makes things work in terms of learning, right? I was kidding about the Feng Tianwei thing. Learning, that was, never mind, that was what, let's start. But, now, put a star on this, the first point. What is learning? Learning equals a relatively permanent change in behavior. So meaning you have to be exposed to some stimulus. Then you got to register as what? Having your behavior different from what it is before. Then some people get confused over this. They say, but am I learning? How does it work when I'm seated here in class and I pick up information? Now, the measurable part, right, of course in the lab we can try to devise something where you learn and then you are immediately measured. In real life, a lot of all these processes are ongoing, but you find that your changed behavior comes a bit later. Like, take a look at Singapore. When we promoted the speak your mother tongue kind of thing, so for the Chinese, it was Speak Chinese campaign back in the 70s. Everyone was just speaking dialect. And we have difficulty communicating within ourselves or amongst ourselves. And not to mention, this will be a big problem when it comes to doing trade, all right, trading with foreign countries like Taiwan, like China, and Malaysia. So what happened? There was a Speak Chinese campaign. And that's not the only campaign we had. We had a lot of other campaigns, Safe Water campaign too. So this cuts across all ethnic groups. But just looking at Safe Water campaign, do you think that on the day it was rolled out, and some people, let's say, got fined because they wasted water, then suddenly our country saved a lot of water? It didn't happen that way, right? Until today, sometimes you still see people spitting, throwing rubbish, despite the campaigns going on. But that means what? Two things. The change, it not only takes time, but so it can be displayed a little after. And when it's displayed, when people feel that, hey, but that's a natural way of doing things, they might feel that they have not learned, but actually there is already learning. And the last thing is, some of these, they translate into newer experiences which people feel. And then they start to think, oh yeah, of course, being friendly with the world, green and protective of environment, it's natural. So it becomes part of their moral principle. Like it's natural, but actually all learning begins with something artificial. You have to force a change. So then the question is, like now it's like very natural, don't throw litter, but it wasn't so. And we have developed an automatic behavior, that's what I mean, that we feel that it's very natural, but it is actually, there was actually a lot of struggle. Now here comes the thing. How do you accelerate this process? How do you make it comfortable for people to display a new behavior? So learning has two parts. It involves a relatively permanent change in behavior because you can still reverse it. Like a person who has quit smoking. Does that mean that the person will forever stop smoking? Or not necessarily. Some friends come, hey, come, let's, okay, then they will just do it again, right? But more or less, if the person has quit, they generally can stick through if the quitting is genuine. So that's why I say it is this word here, it's a relatively permanent change. It's not like absolutely permanent, not so. Okay, but it's largely permanent. Now, to know how to accelerate this change in behavior, you got to look back all the way until what, about 120 years ago, where behaviorists actually changed the world with learning principles. You already learned about that. Behaviorists, they came into the picture early, right? So what did they do? First of all, they made an assumption that all your behaviors, they change because of your reaction to the external environment. Now, they didn't define external environment as outside your body. They simply mean that it's outside your mind. So which means the stimulus can be really outside, beyond your physical shell, or it's beyond your mind, maybe it's happening inside, let's say in your stomach, in your digestive system. Okay? So don't understand this as, oh, behaviors are deterministic, meaning it has to come from outside. The outside is literally beyond your body. No. It can be reflexes. So if you're hungry, you might want to seek food. Okay? So they seek to do all this, and here this slide tells you their assumptions became so strong, it highlights to you, last time I mentioned that they are very obnoxious, they push out everything, right? So this statement tells you how strong their assumptions were. You see, it's very natural for us to answer questions such as, why is she smiling? We will just say, oh, because she's happy. And we just take it as that, right? Behaviorists do not answer this way. They feel that this is wrong. They feel that Well, she's happy only because we can see that she's smiling. Then you ask, of course, because deep down she's happy. The person will then further elaborate and say that, well, you can't see the deep down. What you are seeing is the what is measurable, which is the smile. So we infer that something is going on inside, but we don't know what it is. Let's not talk about it. We know that a person is happy only because the person is showing it through the smile. Now, it's very frustrating to talk to this kind of people, right? You know that there's some emotion going on, but then you cannot talk about it. But they were so strong, they slammed down all these frustrated people. Literally, some people lost their jobs because they were trying to out-argue these kind of people. Okay? So, of course, you learn later that cognitive revolution came in because of the criticisms against them, right? Of course, I would not be so quick to say that people are quick to dismiss them. That's an aftermath. Long time ago, forget it. Behaviorists always wins. I'm not going to repeat this because we covered some of these criticisms before, okay? And then this was something we mentioned too, Pavlov's experiment. All right, I briefly mentioned that if you have food, you have a neutral stimulus, you ring the bell, you show the food, very soon, right, the dog would realize that the food is associated with the bell. So even if you don't present food, you just ring the bell, the dog would anticipate food and salivate more. Okay, covered that before. So it's all about these slides. Okay, here is the thing that we want to go a bit more into because they are technical terms. So instead of talking about things like in very example way, like, oh, it's a food, oh, it's a water, oh, it's sleep, it's sex, all this stimulating stuff, biologically speaking, there are terms for it. Okay, take note. Take note meaning although something like this exactly won't come out in the test, but the concept behind it would. So maybe you just put a half star there. All right, let me explain what they are. The technical term called UCS, or unconditioned stimulus, refers to anything, any object, any situation that will trigger a response, a behavioral response from you automatically. Like food will give rise to what? We just talked about it. Food will make you respond in what way? Yeah, you will salivate more when you see food. We don't talk about the fact that you have eaten and very full, but generally, when we see food, we salivate. Let's look at a few more physiological responses. Okay. So when you are tired, you see the bed. What is elicited? Yeah, you may yawn. Or you may, wow, you start to respond positively. So let's say, right, let's say if you are a guy and you are heterosexual and you see a naked woman in front of you. Oh, would there be physiological responses? Obviously, right? So we will initiate sexual responses. Whilst we may not behave in that way, like you go up and you suddenly just hug the person or something like that, but physiologically, we will have arousal. So any kind of thing, whether it's a situation or an event that triggers a response automatically, that thing is called an unconditioned stimulus. Then automatically, the response is defined as an unconditioned response. Now, but what about neutral stimulus? For Pavlov's dog, the bell was neutral. It did not mean anything until the food was presented. Now, let's look at anything in this room. What is an object here that you look at it, right? Then you feel, yeah, what's the big deal about this? Plenty of things. Look at the table. Does the table give you excitement? No. All right. If it does create some kind of what? Sexual excitement. Okay, then you have a disorder. It's called fetish, sexual fetish disorder, right? So a lot of things in life are neutral. And they are supposed to be that way. Why do they then become a problem? Because all neutral stimulus can have an opportunity to become a conditioned stimulus by what? By being shown or experienced somewhere where an unconditioned stimulus is available. Think back about Pavlov's dog. The ringing of the bell meant nothing. We will stop in about 10, maybe worst case scenario, 15 minutes. The bell was nothing. But when it was presented with food, food was an unconditioned stimulus, right? So whenever the two things are presented together, somewhere in your brain, the nerves will connect. Once the connection is complete, the neutral stimulus becomes upgraded to be called a conditioned stimulus. So when you listen out to people using this term, you know that, oh, that was talking about something that was originally neutral. But now something has changed. Okay? Now, this is the part that's confusing. Why? A conditioned response simply means what? The response you get, for example, the dog salivation, upon hearing the bell. So it's no longer talking about the salivation due to food, it's about the salivation due to the bell. But it is still the same thing. Beforehand was salivation. After that was still salivation. So you need to read carefully and make sure that when is the response occurring? Is it with the food or is it with the bell? Why? Now going back to the example of a sexual fetish disorder. So we know that, no, let's say the table is neutral, so we know that once upon a time the person was normal. Somehow something has occurred so that now the person sees any table, the person starts to have sexual arousal. So this arousal is a conditioned response. It's no longer an unconditioned response. Therefore, we seek to break that chain so that we can reverse the person back to normal, right? Then we will have to identify what could be the conditioned stimulus, which is not always clear. Somehow somebody did something, right? Now, this part is very artificial. In real life, right, there can be people, let's say, let's look at the world's first case of sexual fetish disorder that was cured. So this man, he had to cross-dress. He had to wear clothes of a woman, moan and groan like a woman, then he will be aroused enough to have sex with his wife. No matter what the wife did, nothing will happen. But this was very, unacceptable behavior in the 60s. Eventually, the wife forced the husband to go see a doctor who referred the patient for psychological treatment. And they never found out how cross-dressing actually made it. But they speculated that maybe because the man, right, the man's parents love girls. They wanted to have daughter they didn't have. So sometimes they dress him up and then they showered affection. So eventually it grew into some form of sexual fetish. But then here's the thing. If you look at how people work on it, is that we must find a cause. So they found the cause, the parents. But all this research, right, shows that you don't always have to trace to the cause to solve the problem. So what they did, as in the therapists did, right, was to start to make something happen to this portion, conditioned response. Like they work with a doctor to prescribe vomiting-inducing medicine to this person. So he took pictures of himself cross-dressed, recorded his moans and groans, and then after that, the therapy started. So when he arrived at the clinic, he swallowed the 2 pills of emetic, right, the vomiting-inducing medication, and he started to look at himself cross-dressed and listen over headphones of his moans and groans. But this is now being paired with the uncomfortable feeling of vomiting. So very soon, right, the pleasure became nauseous experience. So it broke that habit. So they never actually talk about parents, they never trace back, no need to bother with all this. All you have to do is reverse the conditioned stimulus back into a normal stimulus, maybe by modeling the conditioned response to be paired with something nauseous. So this was a big improvement because everyone, right, all the way up to Freud, always say you must go back to the source. Even our education tells us, everything that is a problem always go to the root of the cause. Right? Yeah, but it's not necessarily so. Okay? So quick check. Read this. So what is the unconditioned stimulus in this exercise? Which is it? Is it the commercial? So you ask yourself, what is, to do this well, right, it's not about reading like you do from start to the end. You have to first ask yourself, what was a response, what was a behavioral output of the person? What was it? So then you jump to the end of the paragraph, or near the end usually. What is the thing that is demonstrated by the person? Anyone from online, you also can answer. Just unmute yourself.
You get hungry. Unconditional response.
So hunger is the response. Now, so then let's look at what automatically triggered hunger, which was the cheeseburger, right? The meal. Okay, somebody said the meal, so it's the cheeseburger. So UCS will be the thing that automatically created a response. That would be the cheeseburger. So in that case, what is the unconditioned response? So then you ask, what did the cheeseburger lead to? Anyone? What? Nope. What is a physiological response that was triggered? Yes, hunger. That's why I say it can be confusing. The hunger occurs in both levels, as an unconditioned response as well as a conditioned response. You have to look at the context to know when it is which. When it's from the burger, the hunger pangs and associated actions of being hungry would be considered as an unconditioned response. And of course, in this case, right now we can isolate out which one was originally a neutral stimulus. The music, it wasn't supposed to make you hungry. But after listening to the music and watching the burger a few times, so now the music got upgraded to become the conditioned stimulus. Okay? And that's actually how advertisements work. Notice advertisements are rarely just one mode. They usually come in the format of an interesting visual and some sort of sounds or jingle. And a more powerful kind of advertisements would also include something meaningful, so they have a story about it, right? So like you look at the I think it's not here, the latest BMW electric car. Then you have Arnold Schwarzenegger acting as Zeus, the god, and what's that goddess actress last time? Salma Hayek, yeah. So she's Hera, and then they were like kicked out of Olympus, because not really kicked out, but they retire. All right. Then there was a lot of problem with electricity, and finally, right, BMW came to save the day with the new electric car. So Zeus can save his electricity, his thunderbolt lah. They create a story, and then so people after watching they laugh. All these emotions can add on. So now every time you hear the sound or you think of Greek or all these stories, suddenly you feel like you want to buy BMW. Okay, so these are how powerful things are. Incidentally, all these processes are known as classical conditioning. So in order to be very specific, the scientists start to label certain processes. They say that learning is very general term. But when you are able to show that you have a new, relatively permanent behavior, it means that you have acquired it. So they call the process of having a new relative, so you learn, right? So if you learn, all right, through some form of learning, you display a relatively permanent new behavior. It's called acquisition, which means it's recognized that there are other ways of learning. But the specific way of having a relatively permanent change in behavior, because of some of these processes that are mentioned, it's called acquisition. So to remove that behavior, it's called extinction. Now, is extinction the same as forgetting? Yes, no? Okay, we're short of time, so I wouldn't wait for all the votes to come in. But those of you who answer, no, you're correct. Think about smoking. When a person has quit smoking, they have acquired a new behavior, which is to suppress the urge to smoke, correct? So their old habit of smoking has become extinct, correct? So if you follow up to now, then you ask yourself the question, Does that mean that the person has forgotten how to smoke? Yeah, no. So, so the person will still remember about smoking. The person will still might, if they succumb to relapse, they smoke again. So extinction is not forgetting. Extinction simply is what? The reduction of behaving in the old way. The frequency of behaving in the old way. If you reduce it to almost zero, like if you define the period that I want to measure for 10 years, and 10 years there is no recurrence, then we know the person has kicked the habit. Okay? Question? All right, I'll finish this last part before we go. This is an important process associated to classical conditioning. Next week, when we come back, we will distinguish between classical versus operant conditioning. First of all, right, look at this chart. Spontaneous recovery describes a phenomenon where after you have acquired something, meaning you have learned a behavior, and you stop giving the unconditioned stimulus. What do I mean? Like for example, take the dogs, right? The dogs, you ring the bell, you give the food, eventually ringing the bell alone will make the dog salivate more. Remember this part? So what if I ring the bell, okay? That means after the dog has learned to salivate, right? I now ring the bell without giving the food. So I ring, there's salivation. I ring, there's salivation, but no food. Maybe after 8 times, the dog decided that now fake me or cheat me. Ring bell, also no food. The dog, of course, the dog, who knows how it thinks, right? But it's something like that, and the dog stopped salivating. We are really, oh, wait, let me use this. We are really looking at this. See, ring bell, give food, ring bell, also, the acquisition becomes stronger and stronger, more and more saliva. But then you stop giving food, no more conditioned stimulus. So how do we help people kick their habit? Is to continue having the neutral stimulus, but not giving the unconditioned stimulus. So for example, smokers, right? They feel the urge, whatever, but no access to cigarette. After some time, it comes down. Because some smokers, they smoke because of stress. Some smokers, they smoke because they feel like, wow, pleasurable. But if there is no de-stressing, no pleasure to it, because the friends all say, hey, you're out of date lah. Now people don't smoke already. So smoking, no kick, they drop. Then it reaches zero, right? Now, but this of course is simplified lah. There is another thing, there is biological addiction. But let's not complicate the matter first. This is another thing. So after some time, nothing much. But what happens when they after that, right, got assigned a new job, and this job has more work? Stress again, isn't it? So when they are back in that situation, it will shoot up. But look at this. Is it going to be as high as before? No. And if they then shoot up, right, but they don't want to cave in, they don't want to smoke to relieve the stress, then this feeling will go down, and then eventually fade away, correct? But look at the time here. Is this time, do you see that this time is much shorter than this time? Okay? So when they first discovered this was like when the dogs, right, were after 1 day of conditioning, well, the dogs all salivate a lot. Then they put the dogs back into the cages because at the end of the day. They came back the next day, they found it strange. Like, or some of the dogs were not having the repeat of experiment. They basically did until ring, until the dogs no longer salivated. Then they put the dogs back in the cages for a few days. The funny thing was that when after a few days the technician came back for the dogs, right? So along the way there were other technicians carrying, but that particular who was the feeder in the original experiment, he came back without the food. But the moment he stepped in, right, the dog salivated again, and it shot up. So that's what Pavlov noticed about something called spontaneous recovery. This is just a prototypical experiment. How does it work in real life? Think of drug addicts. Some of the drug addicts, they take drugs because their friends say, hey, shook ah. Or they are very stressed out with life, so they try to numb themselves by taking drugs, right? Maybe heroin. So now they realize that, wow, if I have drug, well, I feel shook. So more and more they wanted the drug. The urge becomes very strong. Then they got caught, put into rehab prison. Now, no more access to the drug, right? And then got grilled into, there are many ways to de-stress. Okay, zero. So now they don't rely on drugs. But they still have to stay in prison to serve their time. After they go home, what happens? So this point here is going home. Why do you think a lot of them got back to taking drugs after they go home? Why don't they, the moment they step out of prison, then they do it? Like here, this timing here, right? They are just released from jail. Why don't they just, okay, go straight to look for their friends and buy some marijuana, buy some heroin? They don't. They try to avoid their friends. I'm going to turn over a new leaf. They go home and they're stuck. Because the house usually reminds them of that same four walls where they injected themselves. Same stimulus. And that is representative of whatever got them there in the first place. If it's stress, the four walls represented the stress. The urge immediately comes back. If they fight it off, it will take lesser period of time than the cold turkey treatment. So it will go away. But this is not the end. Then after a few days, it will shoot back, but lesser than this. So basically, a person who kicks the bad habit, so now I'm opening up not to just addiction. You procrastinate, so you want to kick that habit. Then you find out, hey, why I got relapse? This is the thing. After working for a few days, it's like this interval. Wow, you are very hardworking for a few days. Shit, how come I relapse? It's normal. But if you relapse and you try to fight the urge away, or you relapse a bit and you catch yourself and you say, okay, no, let me go back again. It will just get lower and lower. Like one day it will become negligible. That's when you've truly kicked the habit of drug addiction, of procrastination, whatever. So don't be arrogant with your first success. Always know there is spontaneous recovery. If we stay alert and vigilant and we fight maybe 2 or 3 more times, then you are safe. Otherwise, you waste your effort. Okay, so psychology teaches people how to overcome some of the traps.
But you are saying that after that, if it's going back again and you didn't control.
Yeah, if you didn't control, it will show up.
It will be worse than the first.
Correct. So if let's say the person goes home, right? So I released from jail, then after I reach home, and unfortunately, maybe one day nothing, then the friend heard about it. The friend said, hey, you are out there. I give you something good and whatnot. So this is actually a big lure. It will shoot up. Then if the friend makes it come, then this one will actually what? It will just go all the way to here, maybe even higher, because of there is always, upon withdrawal, it will swing more to the other side. So it's actually tougher. That's why rehab right now, they are smarter. They usually teach people to what? You know, what you watch on TV, like trying to break away from your old friends, it's old news. Breaking away is helpful, but then your friends will hunt you down. But the idea is to learn a lot more things to make sure that you can be distracted from this, or this one happened way early so that it's lower, and then it goes down quickly. Then you have more, you go through more of these, right? Your friends come also, you are more resistant. Got it? Question? Okay, I see you next week then. Any question from online?